when a broken man met a billionaire who needed what money couldn't buy. The doorbell rang at 11:47 p.m. Daniel Hayes, still holding the wrench he'd been using to fix Emma's bathroom sink, opened it to find Isabella Reed, the Isabella Reed worth $4.2 billion, standing in his doorway, soaked from the rain, mascara streaking down her face like war paint. "I need you," she said, not asked. 6 years ago, her company had destroyed him. Tonight, she didn't even recognize his face. If you want to see how this impossible night changes everything, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The rain had started around 9 that evening, one of those spring storms that turned the streets of Riverside into mirrors reflecting streetlights and the occasional passing car. Daniel Hayes stood at his kitchen sink, elbow deep in the guts of a garbage disposal that had stopped working 3 days ago. Emma sat at the small dining table behind him, her tongue poking out slightly as she concentrated on her homework. Long division, the kind that still required actual pencil and paper. "Dad, what's 743 divided by 17? Daniel didn't look up from the disposal. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, removing the jammed mechanism that had been grinding instead of grinding. "What do you think it is?" "I think 43? Show me your work." She groaned, but he heard the scratch of pencil on paper resume. This was their dance. He never gave her answers, only questions. It drove her crazy. It also meant she actually learned things. The house was small, a 2-bedroom rental on Maple Street that had probably been charming in 1987. Now it was just old, creaky floors, windows that didn't quite seal, a hot water heater that made concerning noises every third Thursday. But it was theirs. The walls held Emma's artwork, secured with tape that left marks Daniel would have to explain to the landlord someday. The refrigerator displayed her report cards, each one a small victory he celebrated with her favorite dinner: spaghetti with the expensive sauce, the one that actually tasted like tomatoes instead of corn syrup. Daniel Hayes was 32 years old and looked older. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 6 years ago, gray threading through his dark hair at the temples. His hands were the hands of someone who worked with them, calloused, scarred in places, nails that never quite got completely clean, no matter how much he scrubbed. He wore a faded Henley shirt with a small hole near the hem and jeans that had been washed so many times they'd gone soft and pale. He hadn't always looked like this, hadn't always been this. 43.7, Emma announced triumphantly. "Round it. 44. There you go." He pulled the freed mechanism from the disposal, metal grinding against metal. "See? You didn't need me." "I always need you, Beatum," she said matter-of-factly, already moving on to the next problem. Something in his chest tightened. Emma had a way of saying things like that, simple, direct, devastating. She didn't know how much weight those words carried. Didn't know that 6 years ago, when her mother had walked out and the world had simultaneously decided Daniel was a failure and a liar, those words had been the only thing keeping him upright. Emma was 6 years old, all sharp elbows and wild dark curls that refused to be tamed by any brush known to man. She had her mother's eyes, green, quick, missing nothing, and Daniel's stubborn streak. She liked bugs, hated pink because everyone expects me to like it, and had very strong opinions about which dinosaurs would win in hypothetical fights. She was the best thing he'd ever done, even if he'd done it accidentally and poorly and while completely terrified. The doorbell rang. Daniel frowned. It was nearly midnight. Nobody visited them. They didn't have that kind of life. Emma's friends came over sometimes, their parents picking them up promptly at agreed-upon times. The mailman left packages on the porch. The landlord called before showing up. "Stay here," he told Emma, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Is it a bad guy?" "No, baby. Probably just someone at the wrong house." But his heart rate picked up anyway. That old instinct from another life kicking in. The one that said when something didn't fit the pattern, pay attention. He opened the door and forgot how to breathe. Isabella Reed stood on his porch. Not someone who looked like Isabella Reed. Not a cousin or a lookalike or a hallucination. The actual woman whose face appeared on magazine covers, whose name dropped stock prices or raised them depending on what she said at quarterly earnings calls. She wore black pants that probably cost more than his monthly rent, and a white blouse, that was currently plastered to her skin from the rain. Her dark hair, usually swept into some kind of severe professional style in photos, hung in wet strands around her face. She wasn't wearing shoes. "I need help," she said, and her voice cracked slightly on the word help. Like it wasn't one she used often. Daniel just stared. His brain had apparently decided to stop functioning. "The house across the street," she continued, gesturing vaguely behind her. "Everything's dead. Power, security, climate control, everything. My phone won't connect to anything. The backup generators won't start. I can't—" She stopped, drew a breath. "I saw your lights. I need help." The mansion across the street. Daniel had watched it being built 2 years ago. A slow transformation from empty lot to architectural statement. Steel and glass and automated everything. He'd never seen anyone enter or leave. The garage doors opened and closed for cars with tinted windows. Packages appeared and disappeared from the front step, but never a person. He'd assumed it belonged to some tech executive who was rarely home, someone who treated houses like hotel rooms. He hadn't known Isabella Reed lived there. More importantly, Isabella Reed had no idea who he was. "Dad?" Emma had appeared behind him, trying to see around his legs. "Who is it?" Isabella's eyes dropped to Emma, and something in her expression shifted. Confusion, maybe, or surprise that children existed in the world and sometimes answered doors. "Just a neighbor, Em. Go back to your homework." "But I finished." "Then get ready for bed. Teeth, face, pajamas. I'll come check in 10 minutes. Emma studied Isabella with the frank, unfiltered assessment only 6-year-olds could pull off, then shrugged and patted away. Daniel heard her bedroom door close. "I can pay," Isabella said, misreading his hesitation. "Whatever your rate is, I'll triple it. I just need someone who knows systems, and the repair companies aren't answering their emergency lines. I'm not that kind of repair guy. You fixed the Morrisons' furnace last month. Jenny Morrison said you were a miracle worker." Of course she'd asked around. Of course she'd done research, even in crisis. That was who Isabella Reed was, thorough, prepared, always 3 steps ahead. He'd watched her operate once, 6 years ago, in a boardroom where she'd dismantled a merger proposal so efficiently the other side hadn't realized they'd been destroyed until they were already in their cars heading home. "Furnaces are simple," Daniel said. "What you're describing sounds like a comprehensive system failure." "That's not my, You're Daniel Hayes." The words landed like a punch. She'd said his name. That meant she'd looked him up, probably in the 30 seconds between leaving her house and crossing the street. That meant she knew. Except she didn't. Not really. Because she kept talking. "You have a degree in systems engineering from MIT. You worked for 6 different tech companies before you moved here. You're overqualified to fix furnaces." She paused. "You're also my only option right now, because everyone else with those qualifications is either asleep, unavailable, or 3 hours away." She'd found his LinkedIn profile probably, the one he'd stopped updating 6 years ago, the one that listed his education and his early jobs but conveniently stopped before Meridian Tech, before the disaster, before everything fell apart. "What happened to your shoes?" he asked, because it was easier than addressing anything else she'd said. She glanced down at her bare feet, pale against the dark wood of his porch. "The floors are heated. I didn't notice they'd gone cold until I stepped outside." She looked back up at him. "Please, I'm not trying to manipulate you with the barefoot damsel thing. I genuinely need help, and I'm genuinely out of options." The rain picked up, drumming harder against the porch roof. Water dripped from her hair onto her shoulders. Daniel had spent 6 years building a life that never intersected with people like Isabella Reed. He fixed appliances, he coached Emma's soccer team, he showed up at parent-teacher conferences and baked sales and community cleanups. He was helpful, reliable, invisible. Safe. Going into that house meant stepping back into the world that had chewed him up and spit him out. It meant using skills he'd deliberately buried. It meant risk. "You always fix things," Emma's voice from earlier, small and certain. "Wait here," he told Isabella. He went inside, found Emma in her room, already in pajamas, purple ones with dinosaurs that she'd insisted on even though they were from the boys' section. "I have to go help the neighbor with something." "The wet lady?" "Yes, the wet lady. It might take a while." You good here by yourself for a bit? Emma considered this seriously. Can I read in bed? 1 chapter. 3. 2. Deal. She stuck out her hand and they shook on it, solemn as a contract. He kissed her forehead. Door locked, phone nearby. You know the rules. Strangers are bad, fire is bad. If anything feels weird, I call Mrs. Chen next door. That's my girl. He grabbed his toolbox from the closet, an old metal thing, battered and reliable. Then he pulled on a jacket and followed Isabella Reed across the street, into the rain, toward the dark mansion that loomed like a threat against the storm-black sky. The house was colder inside than it should have been. Not freezing, but noticeably wrong. That specific discomfort of a climate-controlled space suddenly returned to nature. Isabella led him through the entrance, her bare feet silent on marble floors that probably cost more per square foot than Daniel's entire house. Everything was dark except for the emergency lighting, small LEDs spaced along the baseboards, just enough to navigate without breaking your neck. It gave the whole place an eerie, abandoned quality, like a museum after hours. When did it start? Daniel asked, already mentally cataloging possibilities. 2 hours ago. I was working in my office, upstairs, East Wing, and everything just stopped. Lights, screens, climate control, security. Even my phone lost connection to the house network. Did it shut down gradually or all at once? All at once, like someone flipped a switch. They passed through what appeared to be a living room, though it looked more like a furniture showroom, everything perfectly arranged, nothing lived in. No books left open on tables, no coffee mugs, no shoes kicked off near the couch. It was beautiful and sterile and deeply lonely. Backup generators should have kicked in automatically, Isabella continued. They didn't. I tried starting them manually. Nothing. Daniel followed her to a door that opened onto a stairwell leading down. The basement. Of course, the control systems would be in the basement. That's where you put the expensive, complicated guts of a smart house, away from sight. The stairwell was narrow, lit by the same emergency LEDs. Their footsteps echoed. Daniel's toolbox banged against his leg with each step. How long have you lived here? He asked. 2 years. I'm barely here, maybe 4 days a month. The systems run themselves. Until they don't. Until they don't, she agreed. The basement was massive, a sprawling space that had been converted into what was essentially a data center. Server racks lined one wall, blinking with small status lights. The opposite wall held the electrical panels, HVAC controls, security systems. In the center of the room stood a large custom console, multiple monitors, all dark now, surrounding an ergonomic chair that probably cost more than Daniel's car. This wasn't a house. It was a fortress, a bunker, a place designed by someone who trusted machines more than people. Daniel set down his toolbox and approached the main console. He ran his hands over the equipment, feeling for heat, for any sign of what had failed. Everything was cool to the touch, dormant. Tell me about the last thing you did before the shutdown. I was reviewing acquisition documents, nothing system-related. Any updates recently? Software patches, security upgrades? There was an automated system update 3 days ago. I got a notification that it completed successfully. Daniel's fingers stopped moving. What kind of update? Security patch. The system runs routine updates monthly. This one was scheduled. He pulled out his phone, turned on the flashlight, and started examining the main server rack. The connections all looked secure. No obvious damage, no loose cables. But something was wrong. He could feel it, that old instinct kicking in. The pattern was off. Do you have a laptop? Something with battery power? Isabella disappeared back upstairs. Daniel kept working, systematically checking each component. The electrical systems were fine. Power was flowing to the building, just not getting distributed. The generators had fuel. The batteries had charge. Everything should work. But it didn't. Isabella returned with a laptop, expensive and thin. Daniel took it, connected it to the main system via a diagnostic port, and started pulling logs. And there it was. Shit, he muttered. What? He scrolled through lines of code, his mind automatically parsing what he was seeing. That update 3 days ago? It wasn't a security patch. I mean, it was, but it also installed something else. A logic bomb. In English, someone hid a piece of malicious code inside a legitimate update. It sat dormant for 3 days, then activated on a timer. It's not destroying anything. It's just shutting everything down, sequentially, in a way that makes it impossible to restart without removing the infection first. Isabella moved closer, looking at the laptop screen. Who would do that? Someone who knew exactly what system you're running and exactly how to exploit it. Daniel scrolled further. This is sophisticated, professional, not some random hacker trying to cause chaos. This is targeted. The implications hung in the air between them. Someone had deliberately sabotaged Isabella Reed's home. Someone with access, knowledge, and intent. Can you fix it? She asked quietly. Daniel kept scrolling, his brain automatically building a solution. Isolate the infected modules, roll back to the last clean backup, rebuild the compromised systems from scratch. It would take hours. It would require the kind of deep systems thinking he hadn't used in years. It would also mean admitting he was still good at this. Still that person. Yeah, he said, I can fix it. Isabella exhaled, tension bleeding from her shoulders. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is going to take all night, and I need to check on my daughter every hour. Of course, whatever you need. He looked at her directly for the first time since entering the house. She was still wet from the rain, her hair drying in messy waves, her expensive blouse wrinkled and sticking to her skin. Without the armor of perfect styling and professional distance, she looked younger, tired, almost human. Why don't you trust people? He asked. The question surprised her. Surprised him too. He hadn't meant to say it out loud. Excuse me? This house. It's designed to run without human intervention. No staff, no regular maintenance crews, minimal human contact. Everything automated, everything controlled. That's not just preference, that's deliberate isolation. She stiffened, the vulnerability disappearing behind a wall of ice. You don't know anything about me. I know you paid $5 million for a house you only live in 4 days a month. I know you automated everything, even things that don't need automation, because it meant you didn't have to trust anyone to have access. I know someone breached that system anyway, which means whoever did this is close enough to know your habits and your security. He paused. So yeah, I don't know you, but I know your system, and your system says you're scared of people. I'm not scared, I'm careful. Same thing, different branding. She glared at him, and for a moment he thought she might kick him out, barefoot or not. But then her expression shifted, the anger draining into something more complicated. 3 years ago, my CFO embezzled $40 million over 18 months, she said flatly. He was my father's best friend. I'd known him my entire life. I trusted him completely. He used that trust to nearly destroy my company, and when I confronted him, he looked me in the eye and told me I should be grateful he hadn't taken more. I'm sorry. I don't want your sympathy. I want my house working. Daniel nodded, turning back to the laptop. Message received. He started typing, pulling up the system architecture, mapping out the infection pathways. Isabella didn't leave. She pulled over a second chair and sat beside him, watching the code scroll past. I don't understand what you're doing, she said after a while. I'm finding where the infection started and tracing its spread. Think of it like a disease. You have to identify patient 0 before you can start curing everyone else. And you can do that just by reading. That? She gestured at the screen, at the incomprehensible strings of code. It's a language. Once you learn it, it's just communication. Someone wrote these commands. They left traces, style, patterns, choices. You can read intent in code the same way you can read intent in speech. What does this code say? Daniel studied the screen, the patterns becoming clearer the longer he looked. It says whoever wrote this is very good at their job and very angry at you. How can you tell they're angry? Because this didn't need to be this complicated. If you just wanted to shut down a system, there are simpler ways. This is elegant, thorough, and cruel. It's not about destruction, it's about humiliation. They wanted you powerless, vulnerable, forced to ask for help. He glanced at her. This is personal. Isabella's jaw tightened. Then they succeeded. They worked in silence after that, Daniel typing steadily while Isabella watched. Every hour he stopped to call Emma, checking in, listening to her talk about her book. 2 chapters had somehow become 4. Each time he hung up, Isabella was still there, waiting patiently, not complaining about the delay. Around 3 in the morning, Daniel isolated the source of the infection, a single corrupted file buried deep in the security protocols, disguised as a legitimate system process. He started the removal process, carefully extracting the malicious code without damaging the surrounding infrastructure. "You're good at this," Isabella said quietly. "I used to be." What changed? Everything. His whole life, his career, his marriage, his sense of self. But he couldn't say that. Couldn't explain that the woman sitting next to him had played a role in his downfall, even if she didn't know it. "I had a daughter to raise," he said instead. Priorities shifted. Her mother? Left when Emma was 3 months old, said she wasn't ready to be a parent, that I'd trapped her, that she needed to find herself. He kept his eyes on the screen. She sends a card on Emma's birthday. Never calls. "I'm sorry. Don't be. Emma's better off. We both are." Months. The file extraction completed. Daniel started the system rebuild, watching as modules came back online one by one. Lights flickered in the basement, then stabilized. The monitors around the console blazed to life. "Is it working?" Isabella leaned forward. "Getting there. The main systems are restored, but I need to test everything, make sure the infection didn't leave any dormant elements." He spent another hour running diagnostics, checking every component, every connection. Isabella stayed beside him, asking occasional questions, slowly learning to read the data displays. She was quick. He'd point out a pattern once, and she'd spot it the next time it appeared. By the time the sun started bleeding light through the basement windows, the house was fully operational. Lights responded to commands. Climate control hummed back to life. Security systems showed all clear. Daniel saved all the diagnostic logs, the code samples, everything that might help identify the attacker. Then he disconnected the laptop and stood, his back protesting from hours hunched over the console. "You should report this to the police," he said. "This is a serious crime. I'll handle it internally first. I want to know who had access to send that update before I involve law enforcement. That's a mistake. Whoever did this is dangerous." "And I'm not?" Isabella stood as well, drawing herself to full height. She was tall, nearly his height in bare feet. "This is my company, my home, my life. I don't outsource my problems to people who don't understand the stakes. The stakes are that someone wants to hurt you. People have wanted to hurt me since I was 23 years old and inherited a dying company from my father. I'm still here. They're not." There was steel in her voice, the kind of certainty that came from winning more battles than you'd lost. But Daniel heard something else underneath it: exhaustion, the weight of always being at war. "What do I owe you?" she asked, shifting to business mode. "Nothing. Neighbor helping neighbor. Don't insult me. Your time is worth something. Then call it paid in full. You gave the school district a grant last year that bought new computers for Emma's school. We're even." Isabella studied him, and he could see her mind working, trying to reconcile the man in front of her with whatever she'd read in his LinkedIn profile. A systems engineer who fixed furnaces and refused payment. A father who left million-dollar skills dormant to raise his daughter. It didn't compute for her. "At least let me make you breakfast," she said. "I can't cook, but I have an excellent coffee maker and probably some bread somewhere." Daniel should have said no, should have taken his toolbox and walked back across the street to his small, safe life. But he was tired and he was hungry, and there was something about the way she'd said, "probably some bread," that made her seem less like a billionaire CEO and more like a regular person who didn't quite know what was in their own kitchen. "Coffee sounds good," he heard himself say. They went upstairs to the kitchen, a massive space of white marble and stainless steel that looked like it had never been used. Isabella found the coffee maker, which did look expensive and complicated, and started it with the confidence of someone who at least knew this one machine well. Daniel called Emma again. She was awake, reading in bed, perfectly content. "Almost done, baby. Another 30 minutes. Can we have pancakes for breakfast? If you promise to help make them." "Deal." He hung up to find Isabella holding out a mug of coffee. He took it, sipped, and nearly groaned. Whatever this coffee was, it was incredible, rich and smooth and complex in a way that his grocery store brand definitely wasn't. There's cream and sugar. Black is perfect. They stood on opposite sides of the kitchen island, drinking coffee as the morning light grew stronger outside. Isabella had found a blanket somewhere and wrapped it around her shoulders. She looked rumpled and human and nothing like her magazine photos. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You can ask. I might not answer." "Well, why did you stop? Engineering, I mean. You clearly still have the skills. You could work anywhere, make serious money. Why furnaces and garbage disposals?" Daniel took another sip of coffee, buying time. How did you explain to someone who lived for achievement and success that sometimes the cost of winning was too high? That sometimes you chose small and quiet because big and loud had nearly killed you? "I like fixing things people actually need," he said finally. "Mrs. Morrison needed heat in her house. The Johnsons needed their washing machine working. Emma needs a father who's present and available, not someone chasing the next big project." He paused. "And I'm good at it. The small things. The things people notice and appreciate. You could do both. You could—" "I tried both. It didn't work." He set down his mug. "I should go. Emma will be getting impatient." Isabella nodded but didn't move. "Thank you. Genuinely. You saved me tonight. You'll figure out who did this?" "I always do." He believed her. Isabella Reed didn't seem like someone who left mysteries unsolved or threats unanswered. Daniel headed for the door, then paused. "Be careful. Whoever did this, they know you. They know your systems, your habits, your vulnerabilities. That's not an outside attack. That's someone close." "I know." Her voice was quiet, almost sad. "I've known since it happened. I just didn't want to admit it." He left her standing in that massive, empty kitchen, wrapped in a blanket, holding her expensive coffee. Walked back across the street to his small house, where Emma was waiting, already pulling out the pancake mix, chattering about her book and her plans for the day. This was his life. Simple, contained, safe. But as he helped Emma measure flour and crack eggs, he couldn't stop thinking about the code he'd seen, the precision of it, the intelligence behind the attack. Whoever had sabotaged Isabella's house was very good. Professional level good. The kind of good that suggested serious resources and serious motivation. The kind of good that reminded him uncomfortably of people he used to work with. People from before. People from Meridian. He pushed the thought away and focused on Emma's pancake batter, which she was stirring with intense concentration, tongue poking out the way it always did when she was working hard. "Dad?" "Yeah, baby." The wet lady seemed sad. Daniel flipped a pancake. "What makes you say that?" "Her house is really big but really empty, like nobody lives there even though she does." Emma looked up at him with those sharp green eyes that missed nothing. "That's sad, don't you think?" "Yeah," Daniel agreed softly. "That's pretty sad." They ate pancakes together as the sun climbed higher, warm and normal, and exactly what he'd built this life to be. And if part of him kept circling back to elegant code and targeted attacks and a woman standing alone in her fortress, well, that was his problem to manage, not his problem to solve. He was done solving other people's problems, especially problems that led back to the past he'd spent 6 years trying to escape. Emma handed him another pancake, syrup-drenched and perfect, and he focused on that instead. On this, on the life that mattered, the life that was his. 3 days passed before Isabella appeared at his door again. Daniel was replacing the chain on Emma's bike when he saw the black Mercedes pull into his driveway. Not the usual sleek sedan that occasionally glided into the mansion's garage across the street, but something more practical, though still expensive enough to look out of place on Maple Street. Isabella got out wearing jeans. Actual jeans paired with a simple white t-shirt and sneakers. She looked almost normal, if you ignored the fact that the jeans probably cost what Daniel made in a week. Emma abandoned her bike immediately. "It's the wet lady, but she's dry now." "Emma, manners." "I'm just making an observation." But she smiled politely as Isabella approached. "Hi, I'm Emma. You came to our house when you were wet." "I did." Isabella crouched down to Emma's level, which surprised Daniel. "I'm Isabella. Thank you for sharing your dad that night. I know it was late." "Ours." "It's okay. He always helps people. That's what he does. Emma tilted her head, studying Isabella with that unnerving directness. Did he fix your stuff? He did. Your dad is very good at fixing things. I know. He fixed my Barbie's arm last week, even though the instructions said it couldn't be fixed. Emma held up the bike. Now he's fixing my bike chain. Do you know how to ride a bike? Isabella straightened and something flickered across her face. Embarrassment, maybe. No, actually. I never learned. Emma's eyes went wide. Never? But you're a grown-up. Emma. Daniel set down his wrench. Why don't you go inside and get cleaned up? We're going to the library soon. Can Isabella come? Isabella probably has work. I'd like that, Isabella said, surprising him again. If that's okay? Emma was already running toward the house, shouting something about showing Isabella her favorite books. Daniel stood, wiping grease from his hands. You don't have to do that. I know, I want to talk to you, and lying to a 6-year-old seems like bad karma. You believe in karma? I believe in not teaching children that adults are liars. She paused. Can we talk? Before the library? Daniel glanced at the house. Emma would take at least 10 minutes to change and find her library bag and argue about whether she needed a jacket. Yeah, okay. They sat on his porch steps, the same steps where she'd stood barefoot and desperate 3 nights ago. The morning was warm, late spring edging toward summer. Mrs. Chen was gardening 2 houses down, her radio playing oldies loud enough to hear. I found out who did it, Isabella said without preamble. The attack on my system. Daniel waited. Richard Cole. He's one of my senior VPs, heads the infrastructure division. She stared at the street. He's been with the company for 8 years. I promoted him twice. I trusted him to oversee our entire security architecture. And he used that access to sabotage you. Looks that way. We pulled his access logs, tracked the update to his credentials. He was careful, but not careful enough. She turned to look at Daniel. He covered his tracks everywhere except one place. He didn't expect someone like you, someone who thinks like an engineer, not a security analyst. You found patterns our entire security team missed. Why did he do it? I don't know yet. That's the part I'm still investigating. She pulled out her phone, pulled up a file, handed it to him. But when I started digging into Richard's work history, I found something interesting. He used to work for Meridian Tech. Daniel's blood went cold. The file on the screen was a personnel record. Richard Cole, hired by Meridian 6 months before the disaster. Promoted to senior engineer 3 months after. Left the company 2 years after everything collapsed, landing at Reed Industries with a glowing recommendation from Meridian's former CTO. You know what Meridian Tech is? Isabella asked, watching him carefully. Everyone in the industry knows what Meridian Tech was. I acquired what was left of them 5 years ago. Bought their patents, their infrastructure, some of their staff. It made sense at the time. They developed some genuinely innovative systems before everything went wrong. She took her phone back. I never dug into what actually happened. The official report said it was a catastrophic systems failure caused by negligent engineering practices. Someone on their team had ignored safety protocols, pushed an unstable update live, and the whole thing collapsed. Cost them everything. Daniel's hands were shaking. He pressed them against his thighs. The engineer they blamed left the industry entirely, Isabella continued, dropped off the grid. I assumed he'd been blacklisted, couldn't get work anywhere. The report made him sound incompetent at best, criminally negligent at worst. Why are you telling me this? Because I started reading the original incident reports last night. The technical details, not the executive summary. And something didn't add up. She pulled up another file. The blamed engineer filed 14 separate safety concerns in the 6 weeks before the failure. Documented every single one. Sent them to his direct supervisor, to the project manager, to the CTO. All time-stamped, all specific, all ignored. Daniel couldn't breathe. His supervisor told him the concerns were overblown. The project manager said they were on a deadline and couldn't delay for theoretical problems. The CTO never responded at all. Isabella zoomed in on one of the documents. 3 days before the collapse, the engineer sent one final memo. Subject line, critical safety violation, System unstable. Recommend immediate shutdown. It went to 12 people. Not one of them acted on it. She looked at him directly. That engineer's name was Daniel Hayes. The world tilted. Daniel stood up, needing distance, needing air. He walked to the edge of the porch, gripped the railing. How long have you known? His voice came out rough. Since last night. I pulled the full Meridian files after I identified Richard. I wanted to understand the connection. She stood too, but didn't come closer. The official report buried your warnings. They claimed you'd acted alone, ignored protocols, went rogue. They made you the scapegoat for decisions made 3 levels above you. Why are you here? Because Richard Cole was your direct supervisor at Meridian. He was the one who told you your concerns were overblown. He was the one who pushed the unstable update live after you explicitly warned him not to. And when everything collapsed, he was the one who signed the report that blamed you for it. Daniel turned around. He destroyed my life, my career, my marriage, everything. I couldn't get hired anywhere. Every interview ended the moment they Googled my name. The technical community treated me like I was toxic. I lost contracts, lost references, lost any chance of working in the field I'd spent 10 years building expertise in. I know. Do you? Do you really know what it's like to be erased? To have your reputation destroyed by lies and then watch the people who lied get promoted while you're fixing garbage disposals to pay rent? No, Isabella said quietly. I don't know what that's like. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix it. You're right, it doesn't. She paused. But information might, evidence might, the truth might. Daniel laughed, but there was no humor in it. The truth didn't matter 6 years ago. Why would it matter now? Because I own Meridian's records now. Every email, every memo, every technical document. I can prove what really happened. I can prove you were right and they were wrong. She took a step closer. I can clear your name. Why would you do that? Because Richard Cole sabotaged my home to send me a message. And I want to know why. I want to know what he's hiding, what he's protecting, what he thinks I'm going to find. She met his eyes. And I think it all connects back to Meridian, to what really happened, to what he helped cover up. The front door opened. Emma appeared wearing a completely different outfit and carrying her library bag, which was covered in dinosaur stickers. Ready. Can we go now? Hi, Isabella. Did you know they have a whole section just for graphic novels? That's like comic books, but longer and they take them seriously. Isabella smiled, and it looked genuine. I didn't know that. Will you show me? Obviously. They took Isabella's car because Emma was fascinated by the heated seats and the screens in the back. Daniel drove his truck into town every day. The Mercedes felt like sitting inside a piece of technology rather than a vehicle. Everything was smooth, quiet, controlled. Emma chattered the entire drive, explaining her library system. Chapter books on Tuesdays, graphic novels on Saturdays, research books whenever she had questions about things. Her favorite librarian, Miss Patricia, who always knew the best recommendations. And her current obsession, marine biology, specifically sharks. Isabella listened with what seemed like genuine interest, asking questions that weren't condescending. When Emma explained that hammerhead sharks could see almost 360 degrees because of their weird heads, Isabella said, "That's incredible. They basically eliminated their blind spot through evolution," and Emma lit up like she'd found someone who actually understood. The library was a low brick building on Main Street, old enough to have that specific smell of books and carpet and decades of quiet reading. Emma made straight for the children's section, dragging Isabella along to show her the graphic novels. Daniel hung back, watching them. Isabella crouched down to Emma's level again, examining the books Emma pulled from the shelf, reading back cover descriptions with appropriate seriousness. She didn't check her phone once, didn't seem impatient or distracted. Miss Patricia appeared beside him, a woman in her 60s who'd been recommending books to Daniel since he'd moved to town. "New friend?" she asked, nodding toward Isabella. "Neighbor. She's helping Emma pick books." "She's good with her. Patient." Miss Patricia adjusted her glasses. "Emma needs patient people. That mind of hers runs fast. Too fast sometimes. No such thing as too fast, honey. Just means the world needs to catch up. She patted his arm. You doing okay? You look tired. Just didn't sleep well. Mm-hmm. She didn't believe him, but she didn't push. Well, you know where to find me if you need to talk, or if you need book recommendations. We just got in a new thriller you'd like. She wandered off to help another patron. Emma and Isabella had accumulated a small pile of books, ranging from shark encyclopedias to a graphic novel about a girl who could talk to animals. Can I get all of these? Emma asked, looking up at Daniel with hopeful eyes. How many is all of these? 7. But 3 are research, so they don't count. That's not how counting works, baby. Please, I'll read them really fast, and we can come back next week. Daniel looked at the pile. Emma's reading speed was genuinely impressive. She'd blow through 7 books in 4 days and retain most of it. Okay, but you help Ms. Patricia sort returns when we're done. Deal! While Emma carried her books to the checkout desk, Isabella browsed the adult fiction section. Daniel found her studying the spines with a slightly lost expression. Not a reader? I read constantly. Reports, briefings, market analyses, but fiction. She pulled out a mystery novel, examined it, put it back. I haven't read a story just for the sake of a story in probably 10 years. That's depressing. That's efficiency. Also depressing. She smiled slightly. Emma recommended this one. She held up a book, a middle-grade novel about a kid inventor. She said it's about someone who builds things that help people. Said it reminded her of you. Something in Daniel's chest tightened. She's biased. She's perceptive. Isabella opened the book, read the first page. Think I should read it? I think you should read whatever you want. That's not helpful advice. You're a billionaire CEO. I'm pretty sure you don't need my advice on anything. I needed your advice on my security system. That was different. How? That was technical. This is personal. And technical problems aren't personal? She closed the book, held it against her chest. Every system failure is personal to someone. Your home stops working. Your data gets compromised. Your privacy gets violated. That's all deeply personal. The fact that it's technical doesn't make it less real. Emma ran back over, library card in hand. Miss Patricia says there's a summer reading program starting next month. Can I sign up? There are prizes. What kind of prizes? Book prizes. Obviously the best kind. Obviously. Yes, you can sign up. Emma hugged him quickly, then turned to Isabella. Are you getting that book? It's really good. The main character reminds me of Dad, but with cooler inventions. I think I will, Isabella said. Thank you for the recommendation. They checked out their books together, Emma chatting with Miss Patricia about the summer program, while Isabella stood slightly apart, watching with an expression Daniel couldn't quite read. Not uncomfortable exactly, but not comfortable either. Like she was observing a foreign culture and trying to understand the customs. Outside, the sun had climbed higher, turning Main Street bright and warm. Emma immediately wanted ice cream, which turned into a negotiation about whether ice cream before lunch was acceptable. It wasn't, but frozen yogurt was apparently a gray area. They ended up at the yogurt place 2 doors down, Emma constructing an elaborate creation with gummy bears and chocolate chips, while Isabella stared at the topping options like they constituted a complex decision matrix. You've never done this either, Daniel asked. I've had frozen yogurt, I've just never... She gestured at the toppings bar. Assembled it myself. It's yogurt, not rocket science. I'm aware. I'm just trying to understand the optimal combination. There is no optimal combination. You just pick things you like. What if I don't know what I like? Emma appeared at Isabella's elbow, holding her own cup of what appeared to be more toppings than yogurt. Just try everything. That's what I do. Sometimes it's gross, but sometimes it's amazing, and you never know until you try. Isabella considered this seriously, then started adding toppings, carefully, methodically, testing small amounts of different options. She ended up with something relatively normal: strawberries, granola, a drizzle of honey. They sat at one of the outdoor tables. Emma swung her legs, licking her spoon between bites, explaining her library books to Isabella in detail that suggested she'd already started reading 3 of them. Daniel's phone buzzed, a text from Mrs. Chen. Someone was asking about you at the hardware store. Man in a suit. Thought you should know. He stared at the message. Nobody in suits came to the hardware store on Main Street. Nobody in suits asked about him. Everything okay? Isabella had noticed his expression. Yeah, fine. He put the phone away. Emma, finish up. We should head home. But I'm not done explaining about Hammerhead reproduction. You can explain in the car. Something in his tone made Emma stop arguing. She finished her yogurt quickly, still talking, but watching him with those sharp eyes that caught everything. They drove back in silence, except for Emma's continued marine biology lecture, which she delivered to Isabella with unwavering enthusiasm. Isabella listened, asked questions, seemed genuinely interested, but Daniel kept checking the mirrors, watching for cars that followed too long, for anything out of pattern. When they pulled up to his house, there was a black sedan parked across the street, not at Isabella's mansion, at the curb directly in front of Daniel's house. A man in a gray suit stood beside it, checking his phone. Daniel recognized him immediately. Marcus Webb, Meridian's former head of legal, the man who drafted the report that destroyed Daniel's career. Emma, go inside. But now, baby, please. Emma looked at the man, at her father's face, and made the calculation. She grabbed her library books and ran inside, glancing back once before closing the door. Isabella was out of the car, standing beside Daniel. Who is that? The past showing up unwanted. Marcus saw them and straightened, putting on a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was older than Daniel remembered, grayer, lines deeper around his mouth. But the suit was still expensive. The watch still cost more than most people's cars. Daniel Hayes. Been a long time. Not long enough. Marcus's smile tightened. I heard you'd landed on your feet. Small town life, simpler work. His eyes flicked to Isabella and recognition dawned. Ms. Reed, this is unexpected. Mr. Webb? Isabella's voice had gone cold, professional. What brings you here? Just a friendly visit. Wanted to check in on an old colleague. We were never colleagues, Daniel said. You were the lawyer who buried me. There's a difference. I was doing my job, following the evidence. You were following orders, and you know it. Marcus's expression hardened. The report was thorough. Multiple engineers reviewed the findings. The failure was traced directly to decisions you made. Decisions I made after being explicitly ordered to implement them by Richard Cole. Decisions I documented objecting to in writing. But somehow, none of that made it into your thorough report. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. Daniel stepped forward. You're here because Isabella found the real records. You're here because she knows what actually happened, and you're here because someone's scared about what she might do with that information. Marcus looked at Isabella. Ms. Reed, I don't know what Daniel's told you, but I strongly advise you to be careful about reopening old cases. Meridian was a complicated situation with a lot of moving parts. Dredging up the past helps no one. It would help me, Daniel said. It would help everyone who was told I was incompetent and negligent. It would help the truth. The truth is in the official report. The truth is in the documents your report deliberately excluded. They stared at each other, 6 years of buried anger rising between them. Marcus broke first, looking away, smoothing his tie. I came here to offer you advice, Daniel, as someone who knows how these things work. Let it go. You've built a life here. You have a daughter to think about. Stirring up the past won't change what happened. It'll only bring everything back, the attention, the scrutiny, the questions. Is that really what you want for Emma? The threat was subtle but clear. Back off, or we'll make your life hell again. Back off, or we'll make sure everyone remembers why you left. Get off my street, Daniel said quietly. I'm just trying to help. Get off my street. Marcus held his gaze for a moment longer, then nodded slowly. Your choice, but choices have consequences. Remember that. He got in his sedan and drove away, smooth and unhurried. The message had been delivered. Isabella was already on her phone. I'm having my legal team pull everything. Every communication Marcus Webb had during the Meridian investigation, every meeting, every email. They'll bury it. They buried it before. They'll bury it again. Not from me. I own Meridian now. Those records are mine. She looked at him. Let me help you. Why? Why does this matter to you? Because Richard Cole sabotaged my home. Because Marcus Webb just threatened you on a public street. Because somewhere in all of this is something they're desperate to keep hidden, and I want to know what it is. She paused. And because you were right 6 years ago and they destroyed you for it. That's not okay. The front door opened. Emma stood there, library books still in her arms. Dad, are you okay? Daniel turned away from Isabella, from the street, from everything that conversation represented. He walked to his daughter, knelt down to her level. I'm okay, baby. Just some old work stuff. The man in the suit seemed mean. He was. Are you in trouble? No, I promise. He touched her cheek. How about we make lunch? You can tell me more about hammerhead sharks. Okay. But she looked past him at Isabella, still standing by her car. Is Isabella in trouble? I don't know. Emma thought about this, then made a decision. She walked past Daniel, right up to Isabella, and held out one of her library books, the one about the kid inventor. You should read this one first. It's about being brave even when people say you're wrong. I think you'll like it. Isabella took the book carefully, like it was something fragile and valuable. Thank you, Emma. You're welcome, Yikom. You can come have lunch if you want. Dad makes really good grilled cheese, I would like that, Isabella said quietly, if that's okay with your dad. They both looked at Daniel. He should say no. Should send Isabella back to her fortress across the street. Should keep his small, safe life separate from whatever storm was brewing. But Emma was looking at him with absolute trust, certain he would do the right thing, and Isabella was holding that book like it might actually mean something. Grilled cheese it is, he heard himself say. Inside, his small kitchen felt even smaller with 3 people in it, but Emma didn't seem to notice. She set the table with fierce concentration, putting out plates and napkins and the good glasses they only used on special occasions. Isabella sat at the table, looking slightly lost, until Emma handed her the task of sorting the mail into junk and not junk. Daniel made grilled cheese and tomato soup, the kind of simple comfort food that Emma loved. He could feel Isabella watching him work, the efficient movements of someone who'd cooked thousands of meals in this kitchen, who knew exactly where everything lived. You're good at this, Isabella said. It's grilled cheese, not surgery. I meant the whole thing, taking care of her, making a home. It's what parents do. Some parents, not all. There was something in her voice, a crack in the armor. Daniel glanced over. Isabella had sorted the mail into 2 neat piles, her movements precise and controlled. Everything she did was like that, he realized. Controlled, managed, safe. Your parents weren't the home-cooked meals type? He asked. My parents were the business dinner with clients type. I ate a lot of hotel restaurant food growing up. A lot of room service. She straightened a piece of junk mail that didn't need straightening. My father died when I was 23, left me a company that was 3 months from bankruptcy and a board that wanted to sell for parts. My mother remarried 6 months later, moved to Monaco, and I see her maybe once a year. I'm sorry. Don't be. I saved the company, turned it profitable in 2 years, proved everyone wrong. She looked up. But I never learned to make grilled cheese, Micah. Emma climbed into the chair next to Isabella. It's easy. You just need bread and cheese and butter. And you have to watch it carefully, or it burns. Dad burned like 10 when he first started making them for me. 12, Daniel corrected. But who's counting? They ate lunch together, Emma dominating the conversation with facts about sharks and questions about Isabella's car, and a complicated story about something that happened at recess involving a soccer ball and a very angry bee. Isabella listened, asked questions, slowly relaxed into something approaching normal. After lunch, Emma declared she needed to read her library books and disappeared into her room. Daniel and Isabella cleaned up together, an oddly domestic rhythm developing. He washed, she dried, both of them careful not to take up too much space. Marcus was right about one thing, Isabella said quietly, drying a plate. If we pursue this, it'll bring attention. Media, legal scrutiny, all of it. Your life here, your privacy, it'll be disrupted. It was already disrupted the moment you knocked on my door. I know, and I'm sorry. Stop apologizing. You didn't do anything wrong. He handed her another plate. Richard did. Marcus did. The people who covered it up did. You're just the one who finally looked close enough to see it. What do you want to happen here, Daniel? He thought about it. 6 years ago, he would have wanted vindication. Public acknowledgement of what really happened. His name cleared, his reputation restored. He would have wanted to stand in front of everyone who'd turned their backs on him and make them admit they'd been wrong. But 6 years had changed him. Emma had changed him. I want Richard to face consequences for what he did. To me. To you. To everyone he's hurt. Daniel set down the dish he was washing. And I want to make sure he can't do it to anyone else. Then help me. You know how he thinks. You know the systems he built, the patterns he uses. You can see things my security team can't. She set down the towel. Work with me. Officially. Let me hire you as a consultant. I don't want your money. I'm not offering charity. I'm offering you a job. Use your actual skills to do something that matters. Taking care of Emma matters. I know it does. And I'm not asking you to stop. I'm asking you to do both. She paused. Flexible hours. Work from home when you need to. Whatever structure works for your life. But let me pay you what you're worth to help me figure out what Richard's hiding. Daniel wanted to say no. Wanted to keep his boundaries firm, his life separate, his risks minimal. But the truth was, he wanted to know too. Wanted to understand why Richard had sabotaged Isabella's house. Wanted to see the full picture of what had really happened at Meridian and why they'd worked so hard to bury it. And maybe, somewhere deep down, he wanted to prove he was still that person, the engineer who could solve impossible problems, who could see patterns others missed. I need to think about it. Fair enough. Isabella picked up the towel again, dried the last plate. But think fast. Richard knows we're looking into him. Marcus knows you're involved. Whatever they're protecting, they're going to move quickly to protect it harder. She left soon after, taking Emma's library book with her, promising to return it when she finished. Daniel watched her drive away, then went to check on Emma. She was sprawled on her bed, already deep into one of her shark books, her face scrunched in concentration. Isabella's nice, she said without looking up. Yeah, she is. She's sad, though, like lonely sad. What makes you say that? Emma finally looked at him. She didn't know how to make frozen yogurt the way she wanted it. She had to think really hard about it, instead of just knowing. That means nobody ever taught her, which means nobody ever took her to get frozen yogurt when she was a kid. That's sad. Sometimes Emma's emotional intelligence terrified him. 6 years old and reading people like books. You're probably right. I usually am. She returned to her book. Are you going to help her with the work thing? Maybe. Would that be okay with you? Will it make the mean suit man come back? I don't know. Emma thought about this seriously. If you help her, will it make things better? Like, actually better, not just different? I think it might. Then you should do it. You always tell me to do the right thing, even when it's hard. This is more complicated than homework, baby. Everything's more complicated than homework, but the rule still works. She looked at him with those green eyes, so certain, so trusting. You should help her, Dad. She needs someone who knows how to fix things, and you're really good at fixing things. That night, after Emma was asleep, Daniel sat at his kitchen table with his laptop open. He pulled up the diagnostic logs from Isabella's system, the code samples he'd saved from the attack. He studied them for hours, looking for patterns, for signatures, for anything that might tell him not just what Richard had done, but why. The attack was sophisticated, yes. Professional, yes. But there was something else there, something personal. Angry. Around midnight, he found it. Buried in the malicious code was a timestamp pattern that matched nothing functional. It was decorative, symbolic. The timestamps corresponded to dates, specific dates. The day Meridian collapsed, the day the official report was released, the day Richard got promoted at his new job. Richard hadn't just sabotaged Isabella's house to send a message. He'd signed his work, left his mark. Like an artist signing a painting or a killer leaving a calling card. It was arrogant, careless. the kind of mistake someone made when they thought they were untouchable. Daniel pulled out his phone and texted Isabella. "I'm in. When do we start?" Her response came 30 seconds later. "Tomorrow. My office. 9 a.m. Then, "Thank you." He closed his laptop, turned off the lights, and went to bed. But sleep didn't come easy. His mind kept circling, building theories, seeing connections. Somewhere out there, Richard Cole was sleeping soundly, thinking he'd gotten away with it, thinking he was protected by time and distance and powerful people who didn't want the truth exposed. He was wrong. Daniel Hayes might have spent 6 years fixing furnaces and making grilled cheese, but he was still the engineer who'd seen the Meridian failure coming, still the man who documented everything, who missed nothing, who understood systems better than the people who built them. And now he had something Richard didn't, someone with the resources to fight back, someone who owned the evidence, someone who wouldn't stop until she had answers. Isabella Reed didn't know it yet, but she'd just declared war on people who'd spent years winning by hiding the battlefield. This time, they were going to fight in the open. And this time, Daniel wasn't going to be the one erased. Mrs. Chen agreed to watch Emma with the kind of enthusiasm that suggested she'd been waiting for an excuse to spoil someone else's child. Daniel left his daughter coloring at the neighbor's kitchen table, armed with specific instructions about snack limits and screen time, knowing full well Mrs. Chen would ignore at least half of them. The drive to Reed Industries took 40 minutes, cutting through suburbs into the polished glass and steel district where corporations built monuments to their own success. Isabella's building rose 30 stories, all sharp angles and reflective surfaces that threw the morning sun back at the sky. The lobby was marble and minimalism, the kind of space designed to make visitors feel small. Daniel gave his name at the security desk. The guard made a call, looked surprised at whatever response he got, and handed over a visitor badge with consultant printed under his name. Ms. Reed's office is on the 28th floor, elevator bank C. The elevator was glass-walled, offering a view of the city as it climbed. Daniel watched the ground fall away, his stomach tight. He'd been in buildings like this before, back when he was the kind of engineer companies fought to hire. Back when his badge said Senior Systems Architect instead of Consultant, back when people knew his name for the right reasons. The 28th floor opened onto a reception area where a woman in her 30s sat behind a curved desk, her expression professionally pleasant. "Mr. Hayes, Miss Reed is expecting you. Conference room 3 down the hall to your left." Conference room 3 had walls of frosted glass and a table that could seat 20. Isabella stood at the head of it, talking to 2 other people, a woman around 50 with steel gray hair cut sharp and severe, and a younger man, maybe 30, wearing glasses and the slightly rumpled look of someone who'd been working all night. Isabella looked up when Daniel entered, and her whole posture shifted, tension releasing slightly like his presence meant something. "Daniel, good. We're just getting started." She gestured to the others. "This is Catherine Marks, my general counsel, and James Park, head of internal security." Catherine's handshake was firm, assessing. "Mr. Hayes, Isabella speaks highly of your technical expertise." James just nodded, distracted, already turning back to the laptop open in front of him. "I've got the access logs pulled up. You want to see them now or after the briefing?" "Now," Daniel said. They spent the next 2 hours deep in data. James had done thorough work. Every system access Richard Cole had made in the past 6 months, cross-referenced with normal usage patterns, flagged for anomalies. The attack on Isabella's house wasn't the first unusual thing. There were others, smaller, tests maybe. Probes into systems he shouldn't have been accessing, brief queries that got logged and ignored because they came from a senior VP with legitimate credentials. "He's been planning this for months," Daniel said, scrolling through the timeline. "These early accesses, he was mapping the system, finding vulnerabilities, testing responses. By the time he launched the main attack, he knew exactly what would work." Catherine leaned over his shoulder. "Can we prove intent? That he meant to sabotage, not just that he accessed the systems? Look at the pattern." Daniel pulled up 3 different access logs side by side. Normal system maintenance follows a logical flow. Check status, verify function, update if needed. Richard's accesses jump around. He's checking unrelated systems in sequence, pulling data that has no connection to his actual job responsibilities. He's not maintaining, he's hunting. Hunting for what? Isabella asked. Daniel studied the logs, looking for the connecting thread. Richard had accessed HR files, financial records, archived project documentation, legal correspondence. Disparate systems with no obvious link except he was looking for something about Meridian, Daniel said slowly. Look at the dates. Every major access spike corresponds to quarterly board meetings. He's checking right before you brief the board, making sure certain information stays buried. James zoomed in on one of the spikes. What information? The truth about what happened, about who was really responsible. Daniel looked at Isabella. You said you acquired Meridian 5 years ago. Did Richard help facilitate that acquisition? He recommended it, said they had valuable infrastructure we could integrate. Isabella's face went pale. He knew I'd eventually have access to all their records. He's been monitoring to make sure I never looked close enough to find what he'd hidden. Catherine made a note on her tablet. That establishes motive for the house attack. He needed to distract you, create a crisis that would keep you focused elsewhere while he covered his tracks better. Except it backfired, James said, because she brought in someone who actually knew how to read the attack signature. They all looked at Daniel. He felt exposed, seen in a way he hadn't been in years. We need the full Meridian records, he said, changing the subject. Everything, not just what made it into the official report. Already pulling them, James typed rapidly. Should have the complete archive by this afternoon. Then what? Catherine asked. We build a case against Richard, but for what? Unauthorized system access? Corporate sabotage? Those are serious, but if this goes to trial, his lawyers will bury us in procedural challenges. We're not going to trial, Isabella said quietly. Not yet. First, I want to know everything. What he did, why he did it, who else was involved. Then I want to confront him directly. That's a terrible idea, Catherine said immediately. Legally, strategically, every kind of terrible. You give him advance warning, he'll destroy evidence. He'll lawyer up, he'll lie, Daniel interrupted. That's what Catherine's trying to say. He's good at it. Had 6 years of practice. Isabella met his eyes. That's why you'll be there. You know the technical details he can't fake. You know what questions to ask. You want me in the room when you confront him? I want you to lead it. Show him what you found. Make him explain it. She paused. Make him face what he did to you. Daniel's hands had started shaking again. He pressed them flat against the table. That's not professional. That's personal revenge. Is it? Or is it just forcing accountability from someone who's never faced it? Catherine looked between them, clearly calculating risks. If we do this, and I'm not saying we should, it needs to be carefully controlled, recorded, witnesses, everything documented so he can't claim coercion or intimidation later. Fine, Isabella said. Set it up, this week, before he has time to do more damage. The meeting broke up after that, James heading back to his office to continue pulling records, Catherine making calls to set up the confrontation with appropriate legal safeguards. Daniel found himself alone with Isabella in the conference room, the city spreading out below them through the windows. You didn't have to volunteer me for that, he said. I know, but you're the only one who can do it right. The only one who knows the technical details well enough to catch him in lies. What if I freeze? What if I get in there and 6 years of anger just shuts me down? Isabella turned to face him fully. Then I'll take over, but I don't think you'll freeze. I think you've been waiting for this chance since the day they blamed you for something that wasn't your fault. She wasn't wrong. Part of him, the part that still woke up some nights in a cold sweat, remembering the moment his career died, wanted nothing more than to face Richard Cole and make him answer for it. But another part, the part that had built a quiet life with Emma, wondered what the cost would be, what stepping back into this world might take from him. I need to pick up Emma by 3, he said. Then we'll make sure you're out by 2:30. For the next 3 days, Daniel lived in 2 worlds. Mornings and evenings belonged to Emma. Breakfast, school drop-off, homework help, bedtime stories. But the hours between were consumed by Meridian records, system logs. Building a case piece by piece, James had pulled everything, and everything was damning. Emails showing Richard ignoring Daniel's safety warnings. Meeting notes where he dismissed concerns as overly cautious and risk-averse. Internal memos recommending Daniel's termination weeks before the actual failure, suggesting Richard had been planning the scapegoating before the system even collapsed. And then there were the financial records. Richard had received a substantial bonus the quarter after the Meridian disaster, tied to crisis management and damage control. He'd gotten promoted twice in 2 years, while the company was supposedly struggling to recover. The official story was that Meridian had failed because of incompetence. The financial records suggested someone had profited significantly from that failure. He didn't just cover it up, Daniel told Isabella on the third day, surrounded by printed documents in the same conference room. He engineered it. Look at these purchase orders. 2 weeks before the collapse, he approved a massive equipment upgrade that required taking half the safety systems offline for installation. He created the vulnerability deliberately. Isabella studied the documents, her expression unreadable. Why? What did he gain from Meridian failing? I don't know yet, but someone paid him for it. Look at this. Daniel pulled up a bank record James had obtained through channels Daniel suspected weren't entirely legal. 3 days after the collapse, $400,000 deposited into an account under his wife's name. Source listed as consulting fees. Who paid him? The transfer came through a shell company. James is tracking it back, but these things are designed to hide the source. Isabella picked up the bank statement, studied it like it might reveal secrets if she looked hard enough. Someone wanted Meridian to fail. Someone with enough money to pay Richard to make it happen. And when it did fail, I came in and bought what was left. The implication hung between them. Someone had orchestrated Meridian's collapse so Isabella could acquire it. Someone who knew she'd be interested, who knew what assets Meridian had that would be valuable to Reed Industries. Who suggested you buy Meridian? Daniel asked. Richard did. He came to me 6 months after the collapse, said they had infrastructure we needed, that the price was right because they were desperate. She set down the statement. I thought he was being a good VP, identifying opportunities. He was setting me up. For what? I don't know. But whatever he's been monitoring in my systems for the past 5 years, whatever he's been making sure stays hidden, it's connected to why Meridian fell apart in the first place. Emma called during lunch break, her voice bright and uncomplicated on the other end of the line. Dad, Mrs. Chen is making dumplings, and she says I can help. Can I stay for dinner? Daniel looked at the pile of documents still to review, the timeline he was building, the case that was slowly taking shape. Yeah, baby, that's fine. I'll pick you up by 7. Are you still doing the work thing with Isabella? Yeah. Is it making things better? He looked at Isabella across the table, focused on her laptop, jaw tight with concentration. I think so. Good. Mrs. Chen says you should invite Isabella to try her dumplings sometime. She makes really good dumplings. I'll pass that along. Okay. Love you. Bye. She hung up before he could respond. Daniel set down his phone to find Isabella watching him. Emma? She asked. Yeah, she's having dinner at the neighbors. Says you should try Mrs. Chen's dumplings. Something in Isabella's expression softened. She's very generous with her invitations. She likes you. She doesn't like most people. I like her too. She's honest in a way most adults forget how to be. They went back to work, but the comment stayed with Daniel. Emma was honest because she hadn't learned yet that honesty had costs, that telling the truth could get you hurt. He tried to preserve that in her, that belief that the world was fundamentally fair and people were fundamentally good. But this, the documents in front of him, the evidence of deliberate sabotage and calculated cruelty, this was the world that had taught him honesty was dangerous, and now he was asking Emma to trust that diving back into it was the right choice. On the 4th day, Catherine called them into her office. She looked tired, folders stacked on every surface, her usually immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. We have a problem, she said without preamble. Richard's lawyer contacted me this morning. He knows we're investigating. He's threatening to sue for harassment and defamation if we pursue this any further. Let him sue, Isabella said. We have evidence. Evidence we obtained through methods that might not hold up in court. James pulled financial records that required some creative interpretation of privacy laws. If Richard's lawyer is smart, and he is, he'll get half our case thrown out on procedural grounds before we even get to the facts. Daniel felt something cold settle in his stomach. So what are you saying? We just let him walk? I'm saying we need to be smarter about this, build an airtight case before we make any accusations. And that takes time we might not have because Richard is clearly preparing to disappear whatever evidence we haven't found yet. Then we move faster, Isabella said. We confront him tomorrow. Force him to respond before he has time to cover his tracks better. With what leverage? If he just denies everything, we're back where we started. Daniel looked at the documents spread across Catherine's desk, the timeline he'd built, the pattern of Richard's access to Isabella's systems. And suddenly, he saw it, the leverage they needed. He's still in your systems, he said to Isabella. Still monitoring, still checking. James showed me the logs. Richard accessed your corporate files 2 days ago, right after our first meeting. So? So he knows we're investigating him. He knows we found the house attack, and he's checking to see what else we might find. Daniel pulled out his phone, opened his notes. That means he's scared, and scared people make mistakes. Catherine leaned forward. What kind of mistakes? The kind where they try to destroy evidence and leave a trail doing it. If Richard's been monitoring Isabella's systems for 5 years, he's left traces. Access logs, file modification, searches. If we can prove he's actively destroying evidence right now while knowing he's under investigation, that's obstruction. That's a crime we can prosecute regardless of what happened at Meridian. Can you prove he's destroying evidence? I can if he's still in the system. James, can you track active deletions or modifications to archived files? James, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner, perked up. Yeah, if he's deleting things, the system logs it. Even if the files are gone, we have records of what was deleted and when. Then we set a trap, Daniel said. We make Richard think we found something specific, something damaging enough that he has to destroy it immediately. And when he does, we catch him in the act. Isabella smiled, sharp and dangerous. What did you have in mind? They spent the rest of the day crafting the bait, a fake internal memo, backdated to appear like it was from the Meridian acquisition period. It detailed a private conversation between Isabella and Richard, discussing concerns about irregularities in Meridian's collapse and Richard's connection to it. The memo was carefully written to sound real but vague enough that it wouldn't hold up to serious scrutiny. James planted it in a section of the corporate archive that Richard had accessed before, somewhere he'd look if he was searching for anything that might incriminate him. Then they waited. At 2:47 p.m., Richard's credentials appeared in the access logs. He was in the system, searching the archive using keywords like Meridian and acquisition and irregularities. At 3:12 p.m., he found the fake memo. At 3:15 p.m., he deleted it. Got him, James said, watching the logs in real time. He just deleted a document that he shouldn't have known existed, using his administrative credentials to bypass normal deletion protocols. That's deliberate destruction of corporate records while under investigation. Catherine made a call to her litigation team. That's enough for obstruction charges. I can get a warrant for his communications, his files, everything. Once we have those, the Meridian connection will follow. Isabella stood, straightening her jacket. Schedule the confrontation. Tomorrow. 10 a.m. I want this done. Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from Emma, a photo of misshapen dumplings and her grinning face covered in flour. Having fun, it said. Mrs. Chen says I'm a natural. He stared at that photo, at his daughter's pure, uncomplicated joy, and wondered what the hell he was doing. Tomorrow, he'd walk into a room and face the man who'd destroyed his career. Tomorrow, everything he'd carefully built over 6 years of quiet stability would be at risk again. But the alternative was letting Richard walk away. Letting him get away with sabotage, with lies, with ruining lives for profit. Emma had asked if helping Isabella would make things better. Not just different, better. He texted back, "You're definitely a natural. See you soon. Love you." Then he looked at Isabella. "Tomorrow. I'll be ready." Bashi. That night, after picking up Emma from Mrs. Chen's house and listening to her detailed explanation of proper dumpling folding technique, After getting her bathed and into pajamas and reading 2 chapters of her current book, Daniel sat alone in his kitchen. He pulled out a box from the back of his closet, something he hadn't opened in 6 years. Inside were his credentials from Meridian, his old employee badge with a photo of a younger man who still thought the world was fair. There were commendation letters, project completion certificates, performance reviews that called him exceptional and invaluable. And there, at the bottom, was the letter of termination, effective immediately, for gross negligence, for failure to maintain safety standards, for causing catastrophic system failure through incompetent engineering practices. Every word a lie, every word sanctioned by Richard Cole's signature at the bottom. Daniel read it again, felt the old anger rise up fresh and sharp. Then he put everything back in the box except the termination letter. That, he folded carefully and put in his pocket. Tomorrow, Richard would see it. Tomorrow, Richard would have to answer for it. The next morning arrived gray and cold, spring deciding to remember it was still partly winter. Daniel dropped Emma at school with the usual routine: lunchbox, library book for silent reading, reminder to be kind and try hard. She hugged him tightly before running to join her friends, and he held on to that feeling, that certainty that he was loved and needed, as armor for what was coming. The Reed Industries building looked more threatening today, all that glass and steel turned mirror bright by the overcast sky. Daniel rode the elevator to the 28th floor, his termination letter folded in his jacket pocket like a talisman. Catherine met him outside the conference room. "Richard's lawyer is here, Marcus Webb." Of course. Of course Richard had called Marcus, the man who'd written the original report that destroyed Daniel, the man who'd shown up at his house making threats. "Is that a problem, Set?" Daniel asked. "Only if you let it be." Catherine adjusted her tablet. "Remember, this is a formal interview. Everything's recorded. Stay calm, stick to facts. Don't let them provoke you into anything that looks like an accusation without evidence." "I have evidence." "Then let the evidence speak." The conference room was the same one they'd been working in all week, but it felt different now, charged, dangerous. Isabella sat at the head of the table, perfectly composed in a navy suit, her expression giving nothing away. James was there with his laptop, and Catherine took the seat beside Isabella. And across from them, Richard Cole sat with Marcus Webb beside him. Richard looked older than Daniel remembered, his dark hair going gray at the temples, lines around his mouth that spoke of stress or maybe just time. He wore an expensive suit and an expression of mild annoyance, like this was an inconvenience rather than a confrontation. Marcus looked exactly the same, polished, professional, ready to bury anyone who threatened his client. Daniel took the empty seat across from Richard, and their eyes met for the first time in 6 years. Richard showed no recognition, no guilt, nothing but mild curiosity about who this consultant was and why he was relevant. "Thank you for coming, Richard," Isabella began. "I wanted to discuss some irregularities we've found in our corporate systems." "I'm happy to help," Richard said smoothly, "though I'm not sure why my attorney needed to be present for a technical discussion." "Because it's not just technical," Daniel said quietly. Richard's eyes flicked to him, dismissive. "I'm sorry. I don't think we've been introduced." "Yes, we have, 6 years ago. Meridian Tech. You were my supervisor." The recognition hit. Daniel watched it happen. Richard's face going still, his posture tightening almost imperceptibly. Marcus leaned over and whispered something, but Richard waved him off. "Daniel Hayes," Richard said, and his voice had changed, gone careful. "I didn't realize you were working with Reed Industries. As a consultant, helping Ms. Reed understand some unusual system behaviors." Daniel pulled out his laptop, opened the files they'd prepared. "Like the attack on our home security system last week. Very sophisticated, very targeted, very deliberate. I heard about that. Unfortunate situation." Richard's voice was perfectly neutral. "I hope you were able to resolve it." "I was. Found the malicious code, traced its origin, identified the attack pattern." Daniel turned the laptop to face Richard. "Found something interesting. The code was signed. Not obviously, but there's a timestamp pattern embedded in the executable. Dates that mean something to whoever wrote it." Richard leaned forward, studying the screen. "I don't see what this has to do with me." "These dates..." Daniel pointed. April 17th, 2020. That's the day Meridian's system collapsed. August 3rd, 2020. That's the day the official report was released. November 12th, 2020. That's the day you were promoted at your new job. The silence in the room was absolute. Those are public dates, Marcus said. Anyone could have used them. This doesn't prove... The access logs prove it, James interrupted, turning his own laptop around. These show every access Richard made to Ms. Reed's corporate systems over the past 6 months, including unauthorized entries into archived files, security protocols, and private communications. I'm a senior VP, Richard said, his voice harder now. I have administrative access to corporate systems. That's part of my job. Then explain why you deleted this document yesterday. Catherine slid a printed copy of the fake memo across the table. A document discussing concerns about your connection to Meridian's collapse. A document that was part of official corporate records. A document you destroyed while knowing you were under investigation. Richard picked up the paper, read it, and something in his expression cracked, just for a moment, just enough to show the calculation happening underneath. This is fabricated. I've never seen this before. Then why did you delete it? Isabella asked. I didn't. The system logs show your credentials accessing that exact file at 3:15 p.m. yesterday and deleting it using administrative override to bypass normal deletion protocols. That's not a mistake. That's deliberate destruction of evidence. Marcus put a hand on Richard's arm, but Richard shook him off. This is entrapment. You planted false evidence to trick me into destroying it? Daniel leaned forward. Why would you destroy something if you'd never seen it before? If it was false, you'd have reported it to legal. You'd have flagged it as fraudulent. You wouldn't have deleted it and tried to hide the deletion. Richard's jaw worked. I want to speak with my attorney, privately. Of course, Isabella said smoothly. But before you do, let's talk about Meridian, about what really happened, about the warnings Daniel sent you, about the safety concerns you ignored, about the system you deliberately made vulnerable 2 weeks before it collapsed. I don't have to answer. No, you don't. You can walk out right now, and we'll hand everything we found to the DA and let them sort it out. Obstruction of justice, corporate sabotage, fraud. They'll have plenty to work with. She paused. Or you can tell me the truth. Why you sabotaged my house. What you've been hiding. Who paid you to destroy Meridian? Richard looked at Marcus, who gave a small shake of his head. Don't talk. Don't answer. Don't give them anything. But Daniel saw it. The moment Richard decided he was smarter than his lawyer, that he could explain his way out of this. I didn't destroy Meridian, Richard said carefully. That was a legitimate systems failure caused by multiple factors. Including the safety systems you took offline for upgrades, Daniel said. That was approved through proper channels. Channels you controlled. Approvals you pushed through despite objections. There were no objections. Daniel pulled out his termination letter, unfolded it, laid it on the table. This is the letter you signed firing me for incompetence, for causing the failure through negligent engineering. But we both know that's not what happened. Richard stared at the letter. You ignored protocols. You went around me to senior management with unfounded concerns. I documented safety violations. I followed proper reporting procedures. I did exactly what I was supposed to do, and you buried it. Daniel's voice stayed level, but his hands were shaking. You took my warnings and hid them. You took my memos and deleted them. You took a system I told you was unsafe and you ran it anyway because someone was paying you to make it fail. That's a serious accusation with no evidence? We have the evidence, Isabella said quietly. The purchase orders you approved, the safety bypasses, the financial records showing $400,000 deposited into your wife's account 3 days after Meridian collapsed. The consulting fees from a shell company we're currently tracing back to its source. Richard's face had gone pale. Those are privileged financial records. You have no legal right. We have every right to investigate fraud and sabotage within our own corporate systems. And once we connected your attack on my house to your history at Meridian, everything became relevant. Marcus stood. This meeting is over. My client won't be answering any further questions. And I'll be filing a motion to suppress any evidence obtained through illegal search. Sit down, Marcus, Isabella said, and her voice had gone cold. You want to talk about illegal search? Let's talk about how you wrote a report that omitted 14 documented safety warnings. Let's talk about how you ignored evidence that would have cleared Daniel and instead built a case that destroyed his career. Let's talk about who told you to do that and what you got in return. Marcus remained standing, but his confidence had wavered. I wrote an accurate report based on the information available. You wrote a cover-up, and we can prove it. Well, Richard stood too, and Daniel saw it then. The anger, the fear, the realization that the walls were closing in. You don't know what you're dealing with. You think this is about me? About one sabotaged house? This is so much bigger than you understand. Then explain it, Isabella said. I can't, because if I do, I'm dead. Not metaphorically. Actually, dead. Richard's voice had gone shaky. You want to know who paid me to make Meridian fail? You want to know why I've been monitoring your systems for 5 years? Because the same people who wanted Meridian's tech in your hands are still watching, still waiting, still making sure you never figure out what they really wanted. The room went silent. What did they want? Daniel asked. Richard laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're the brilliant engineer. You figure it out. Look at what Meridian was building before the collapse. Look at what Reed Industries has done with those patents since the acquisition. Look at who benefits. He grabbed his jacket. I'm done here. You want to press charges, press them. But know that whatever you think you've uncovered, it's nothing compared to what you'll find if you keep digging. And the people behind this don't like questions. He walked out, Marcus following, leaving the threat hanging in the air behind them. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Isabella stood, walked to the window, stared out at the city below. He's right about one thing, she said quietly. This is bigger than we thought. Daniel felt it too. The sense that they'd opened a door they couldn't close, that Richard's attack on Isabella's house was just the visible edge of something much larger and more dangerous. Catherine was already on her phone talking to someone about security, about protection, about next steps. James was pulling up files, searching for connections they'd missed. And Daniel sat there with his termination letter still on the table, realizing that clearing his name might be the least important thing they'd discovered today. Somewhere out there, someone had orchestrated the destruction of an entire company, the ruining of lives, the theft of technology, all for reasons they still didn't understand. And Isabella Reed, in trying to help Daniel get justice, had just put herself directly in their crosshairs. Daniel left the Reed Industries building with his termination letter still in his pocket and a weight in his chest that felt like drowning. The sky had opened up while they were inside, rain turning the city streets slick and gray. He sat in his truck for 10 minutes, hands on the wheel, engine off, trying to process what had just happened. Richard's parting words kept circling. Look at what Meridian was building. Look at what Reed Industries has done with those patents. Look at who benefits. His phone buzzed. Isabella, are you okay? He typed back, going to pick up Emma. Need to think. Her response came immediately. We should talk. Tonight? Later he sent, then started the truck and drove toward Emma's school, the windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the rain. Emma was waiting under the awning with her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, when he pulled up. She ran to the truck, backpack bouncing, and climbed in with the uncomplicated energy of someone whose biggest concern was whether they'd have time to play before dinner. How was work? She asked, buckling her seatbelt. Complicated. Did you fix the thing? Not yet, still working on it. She studied his face with those too perceptive eyes. You look sad. Just tired, baby. That's what grown-ups say when they're actually sad but don't want to talk about it. Daniel pulled out of the school parking lot, focusing on the road instead of his daughter's uncomfortable accuracy. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just notice it more when I'm right about stuff you don't want to talk about. They drove in silence for a few blocks, rain drumming on the roof. Emma pulled out a book from her backpack and started reading, giving him space the way she somehow always knew to do when he needed it. At home, Daniel made mac and cheese from a box while Emma did homework at the kitchen table. Normal, safe, the kind of evening that had defined the last 6 years of his life. But his mind kept pulling back to the conference room, to Richard's face when he realized they had him cornered, to that final threat about things being bigger than they understood. Dad? Emma's voice pulled him back. You're burning the pasta. He jerked the pot off the burner, cursing under his breath. The bottom layer had scorched, turning the water brown. Emma appeared at his elbow, peered into the pot, and made a face. We could order pizza, she suggested diplomatically. Yeah, pizza sounds good. While they waited for delivery, Emma sat on the couch reading, and Daniel stood at the window, looking across the street at Isabella's dark mansion. The security lights were on now, motion sensors triggered by wind and rain. The whole place lit up like a fortress preparing for siege. His phone buzzed again. This time it was James. Found something in the Meridian patents. You need to see this. A link followed, leading to a technical document that made Daniel's blood run cold as he read it. Meridian hadn't just been developing smart home systems. They'd been building something else, something their public-facing projects had disguised. Adaptive learning algorithms that could predict behavior patterns, integrate with security systems, monitor communications, the kind of technology that, in the wrong hands, could turn any connected home into a surveillance platform. And Isabella owned all of it now, had integrated pieces of it into Reed Industries' own systems over the past 5 years, probably without realizing what she was actually implementing. The doorbell rang. Pizza. Daniel paid the delivery guy, brought the boxes to the coffee table, and they ate in front of a nature documentary about octopuses that Emma had been excited to watch. She kept up a running commentary about cephalopod intelligence while Daniel's mind raced through implications. Someone had paid Richard to destroy Meridian so Isabella would acquire it. Someone wanted this technology in her hands specifically. But why? What were they planning? After Emma went to bed, Daniel sat at his kitchen table with his laptop open, pulling up everything he could find about Reed Industries' product development over the past 5 years. The home automation systems they'd launched, the security platforms they'd sold to corporations and government agencies, the smart city infrastructure projects they'd won contracts for. All of it built on Meridian's foundation, all of it potentially compromised by whatever backdoors or hidden functions had been embedded in the original code. His phone rang. Isabella. Did you see what James sent? She asked without preamble. Yeah. I've had my technical team pulling apart every system we've deployed that uses Meridian code. It's everywhere, Daniel. Consumer products, corporate security, municipal infrastructure. If there's a backdoor in the original architecture, then whoever has the keys can access millions of systems, can monitor, collect data, potentially control. Daniel rubbed his eyes. This isn't about sabotaging your house. This is about turning your entire company into a surveillance apparatus. But for who? Who benefits from this? I don't know, but Richard does, and he's scared enough of them to keep quiet, even when we had him cornered. Isabella was quiet for a moment. I'm shutting it down. All of it. Every product, every system, every deployment. Tomorrow morning, I'm announcing a total recall for security updates. We'll rebuild everything from scratch. That'll cost you millions, maybe billions. I don't care. I won't be complicit in whatever this is. Daniel heard the determination in her voice, the absolute certainty. This was who Isabella Reed was at her core. Someone who, once she saw a problem, couldn't walk away from it no matter the cost. There's something else, he said. Richard mentioned people who don't like questions, people who make sure problems disappear. If you start tearing apart these systems publicly, they'll know you're getting close to whatever they're hiding. Let them know. I'm done being careful. Isabella. I spent 5 years monitoring my own systems because I was afraid someone would betray me again. I built walls around everything, trusted no one, kept everyone at a distance because it felt safer. Her voice had gone quiet, raw. And it turns out I was right to be paranoid, but wrong about where the threat was coming from. It wasn't people getting too close. It was people I'd already let in who were using that access against me. Daniel understood that. Had lived it himself after Meridian, when trust became a luxury he couldn't afford. What do you need from me? He asked. Tomorrow, I'm holding a board meeting. I need to explain what we found, what we're doing about it, and why it matters. They're going to push back. This kind of recall will tank our stock price, cost us contracts, damage relationships with major clients. She paused. I need you there to explain the technical details, to show them why this isn't optional. Your board doesn't know me. They're not going to listen to some consultant they've never heard of. Then I'll make them listen. You were right about Meridian. You were right about Richard. You're right about this. There was something fierce in her voice. Help me do the right thing, even if it's expensive. Daniel looked around his small kitchen, at the drawings Emma had taped to the refrigerator, at the life he'd built that was safe and small and uncomplicated. Saying yes to Isabella meant stepping fully back into a world that had chewed him up once already. It meant making himself visible again, putting Emma at risk by association. But saying no meant walking away while millions of people used compromised systems, while Isabella faced down powerful enemies alone, while the truth stayed buried under layers of corporate protection. What time's the meeting? He asked. 9 a.m., formal dress. These people respect appearances. I don't own a suit anymore. Then I'll have one sent over. What size are you? He told her. They talked logistics for a few more minutes, then said goodnight. Daniel sat alone with his laptop, pulling up the technical documents again, building the presentation he'd need to deliver tomorrow. Around midnight, there was a knock at his door. He checked the window first. 6 years of caution didn't disappear just because he was trying to do the right thing. Isabella stood on his porch, holding a garment bag and looking soaked from the rain. He opened the door. You could have had a courier deliver that. I was already out, couldn't sleep. She stepped inside, dripping on his floor. Also, I wanted to make sure you were really okay with this. Tomorrow's going to be brutal. I know. The board will tear you apart. They'll question your credentials, bring up Meridian, suggest you're biased or unreliable, or making things up for attention. I know that too. She set down the garment bag, pushed wet hair out of her face. Then why are you doing it? Because you asked, because it's right, because I spent 6 years hiding and I'm tired of it. Isabella looked at him for a long moment, something complicated moving across her face. I'm sorry I pulled you into this. You had a good life here, a safe life. I ruined that. You didn't ruin anything. You just reminded me who I used to be before I decided being invisible was safer than being honest. Is that a good thing? I don't know yet. Ask me after the board meeting. She smiled slightly, tired and real. Fair enough. They stood in his small entryway, rain still audible on the roof, both of them soaked and exhausted and facing down something neither fully understood yet. I should go, Isabella said, but she didn't move. You could stay. Daniel gestured vaguely. Not stay. But it's late. You're wet. I have a couch. And terrible coffee. Your coffee's not terrible. It's not $500 machine coffee either. Sometimes terrible coffee is exactly what you need. He made coffee while she dried off with a towel from the bathroom, both of them moving carefully in the small space, aware of proximity and possibility and the fact that this, whatever this was developing into, was complicated enough without adding more layers. They sat at his kitchen table, drinking coffee that was indeed several steps down from what she was used to, talking through the presentation for tomorrow. Isabella had a sharp mind for strategy, for anticipating objections and building counterarguments. Daniel had the technical expertise to back up every claim. Together, they built something airtight. Around 2 a.m., Isabella's head started drooping. She caught herself, sat up straighter, took another sip of coffee. You should sleep, Daniel said. Big day tomorrow. So should you. I don't sleep much anymore. Old habits. From Meridian? From being a single parent to a 6-year-old who likes to wake up at 5:30 a.m. full of questions about the universe. Isabella smiled. She's remarkable. Emma. The way she sees things, the way she connects ideas. That's not just natural intelligence. That's someone who's been encouraged to think, to question, to explore. That's all her. I just try not to screw it up. You're doing more than that. You're raising someone who believes the world is fundamentally good, that problems can be solved, that people are worth trusting. That's incredibly hard to do when you have every reason to believe the opposite. Daniel looked down at his coffee. Some days I worry I'm lying to her, teaching her things I don't believe anymore just because I want them to be true. You're giving her hope. That's not lying. That's parenting. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the kind that only happens between people who've stopped performing for each other. Finally, Isabella stood, stretched, gathered her things. I really should go. Let you get what sleep you can. Daniel walked her to the door. She paused on the threshold, rain still falling steadily outside. Thank you, she said quietly, for saying yes, for helping even though it costs you. Thank you for asking, for thinking I was worth the risk. She held his gaze for a moment, something unspoken passing between them, then stepped out into the rain and crossed back to her fortress. Daniel watched until she was safely inside, lights coming on in the mansion's windows. Then he closed his door, checked on Emma one more time, and tried to sleep. He managed maybe 3 hours, waking before dawn with his mind already racing through the day ahead. He got Emma up, made breakfast, packed her lunch, went through their morning routine while his stomach twisted with anticipation and dread. You look fancy, Emma said when he came out wearing the suit Isabella had sent. It fit perfectly. Dark gray, expensive fabric, the kind of thing he used to wear to important meetings in another life. I have to talk to some important people today. About the work thing with Isabella? Yeah. Are you nervous? Very. Emma studied him seriously. You'll be okay. You're really smart and you know how to explain stuff good. Plus, Isabella will be there and she likes you. I like her too. I know, that's why it'll work out. Emma said it with absolute certainty, like the universe was fundamentally fair and things worked out for people who tried hard and cared about each other. Daniel hugged her tightly, holding on to that certainty like armor. Mrs. Chen agreed to take Emma after school, asking no questions but giving Daniel a look that suggested she knew something significant was happening. He drove into the city feeling like he was heading into battle, the suit that fit too well a costume for playing a role he'd abandoned. The Reed Industries boardroom was on the 30th floor, all glass walls and a table so polished it reflected the ceiling. 12 board members sat in expensive chairs, ranging in age from late 40s to early 70s, every one of them looking at Daniel like he was an unwelcome interruption to their quarterly agenda. Isabella sat at the head of the table, perfectly composed in a black suit, her expression giving nothing away. Catherine was there, along with James and a handful of other executives Daniel didn't recognize. Ladies and gentlemen, Isabella began, thank you for adjusting your schedules on short notice. We've discovered a serious security vulnerability in our systems that requires immediate action. What kind of vulnerability? Asked a silver-haired man Daniel's briefing notes identified as Robert Lawson, the board's longest-serving member. And why wasn't this brought to the security committee first? Because it goes beyond a simple security issue. It involves potential sabotage, embedded surveillance capabilities, and connections to organized corporate espionage dating back 5 years. Isabella gestured to Daniel. This is Daniel Hayes. He's a systems engineer who helped identify the problem. I've asked him to explain the technical details. Daniel stood, connected his laptop to the presentation screen, and felt every eye in the room assess him, calculate his worth, measure him against whatever expectations they'd formed. 6 years ago, he began, keeping his voice steady, I worked for Meridian Tech. I was the lead systems engineer on their smart home platform. 3 weeks before the system went live, I identified critical security vulnerabilities that made the entire architecture unsafe. I documented my concerns, filed reports, and recommended we delay launch until the issues were resolved. My supervisor, Richard Cole, ignored those warnings. The system launched. It failed catastrophically. The company collapsed. He pulled up the first slide, showing the technical specifications of Meridian's original platform. The official report blamed me for the failure, said I'd ignored safety protocols, made negligent decisions, caused the collapse through incompetent engineering. That report was false. Everything I'd documented, every warning I'd filed, was excluded from the investigation. He looked directly at Robert Lawson. The man who wrote that report was Marcus Webb. The supervisor who ignored my warnings was Richard Cole. Both of them are now connected to Reed Industries. Murmurs around the table. Someone started to object, but Isabella held up a hand. Let him finish. Daniel pulled up the next slide, showing the attack on Isabella's house. 2 weeks ago, someone sabotaged Ms. Reed's home security system. The attack was sophisticated, targeted, and signed with timestamps corresponding to key dates in Meridian's collapse. We traced it to Richard Cole, who had been monitoring Reed Industries systems for years. systematically ensuring that certain information stayed hidden. What information? Asked a woman on the board, younger than the others, leaning forward with sharp interest. This. Daniel pulled up the patent documents James had found. Meridian wasn't just building smart home systems. They were developing adaptive surveillance technology, algorithms that could monitor behavior, predict patterns, integrate with existing security infrastructure. And when Reed Industries acquired Meridian's assets 5 years ago, you acquired this technology too. It's been integrated into every major product you've launched since. The room erupted. Questions flying, voices raised, some board members demanding to know why they hadn't been informed, others insisting this was impossible, a few immediately seeing the implications and looking horrified. Robert Lawson's voice cut through the chaos. You're telling us our products have surveillance capabilities we didn't authorize? I'm telling you the foundation your products are built on was designed with surveillance capabilities from the start. Whether those capabilities are currently active, who has access to them, what data they've collected, we don't know yet. But the architecture is there, embedded in the core code. This is absurd, another board member said, an older man with a thick Texas accent. We have security teams, compliance reviews, regulatory audits. Someone would have caught this. Richard Cole oversaw all of that, Catherine interjected. He controlled what got reviewed, what got flagged, what got reported to the board. He's been systematically covering up these vulnerabilities for 5 years. Why? Robert asked. What does he gain? We don't know yet, Isabella said. But whoever paid him to sabotage Meridian wanted this technology in our hands specifically, wanted us to deploy it widely, integrate it into critical infrastructure, get it installed in millions of homes and businesses, and they wanted it done without us realizing what we were actually distributing. The implications settled over the room like a physical weight. Daniel watched board members calculate stock prices, legal liability, public relations disasters, criminal investigations, fear replacing skepticism on face after face. What's your recommendation? Robert asked Isabella directly. Full recall. Every product, every system, every deployment that uses Meridian code. We announce it tomorrow, eat the financial loss, and rebuild from scratch with independent security audits at every level. That'll cost us billions. Tank our stock price. Destroy client relationships we've spent years building. Yes. And you're willing to do that based on the word of a consultant who was fired from his last engineering job for incompetence? Daniel felt the blow land. There it was. The reputation Richard and Marcus had built for him, weaponized exactly as predicted. But Isabella's voice went cold. Daniel Hayes wasn't fired for incompetence. He was scapegoated by people who needed someone to blame for a disaster they'd caused. People who are now threatening our company, our clients, and potentially millions of users who trusted us to keep them safe. She looked around the table. So yes, I'm willing to do this based on his expertise. Because he was right about Meridian, he's right about Richard, and he's right about this. The only question is whether you're willing to prioritize actual security over quarterly earnings. Silence. Then Robert Lawson, who'd been studying Daniel throughout the presentation, spoke quietly. I know who you are. I sat on Meridian's board when the collapse happened. I read the report Marcus Webb prepared. I voted to accept its findings. He paused. I also read your original safety warnings afterward, when I was trying to understand how we'd missed something so catastrophic. Your concerns were legitimate, specific, and ignored. I've regretted that vote ever since. Daniel stared at him, not sure what to say. If Ms. Reed trusts your analysis, Robert continued, then I'm inclined to trust it as well. I move that we authorize the full recall and security audit as recommended. Second, said the younger woman immediately. The vote wasn't unanimous. 3 board members abstained, 2 voted against, but it carried. Isabella would have her recall, her investigation, her chance to do the right thing regardless of cost. The meeting broke up shortly after, board members filing out in small clusters, voices low and worried. Robert Lawson approached Daniel as he was packing up his laptop. I owe you an apology, the older man said, for accepting Marcus Webb's report without sufficient scrutiny, for contributing to the destruction of your career. You didn't know. I should have. That's what board oversight means. actually overseeing, not just rubber stamping what legal tells us. He extended his hand. Thank you for not giving up on the truth, even when it would have been easier to walk away. They shook hands. Robert left. Daniel found himself alone in the boardroom with Isabella, who was staring out the window at the city below. You did it, he said. We did it. You're the one who made them believe. Robert Lawson made them believe. I just presented the evidence. You presented yourself, showed them who you really are, instead of who Marcus Webb's report said you were. She turned from the window. That took courage. Or stupidity, still not sure which. She smiled slightly. Courage and stupidity look pretty similar until you know how it ends. Daniel's phone buzzed. A text from Emma, sent from Mrs. Chen's phone. Dad, when are you coming home? Mrs. Chen says I can't have ice cream until you say it's okay. He showed Isabella the message. She read it and laughed, genuine and unguarded. You should go. Tell Mrs. Chen ice cream is authorized. What about you? What happens next? I have about 1,000 phone calls to make, press releases to draft, clients to notify before they hear it from the news, legal strategies to coordinate with Catherine. She looked tired suddenly, the weight of what they'd just set in motion settling onto her shoulders. But it's the right thing, so I'll do it. Daniel wanted to stay, to help carry some of that weight, to be there while she faced down the consequences of choosing truth over profit. But Emma was waiting, and his daughter needed him more than Isabella needed another person in the room while she made difficult calls. If you need anything, I know where you live, Isabella said. Literally across the street. That's still weird, by the way. What is? That you've been living across from me for 2 years and we never talked until your house broke. Maybe it needed to break. Maybe we both did. A little. She tilted her head. Go home, Daniel. Be with Emma. Let me deal with the corporate fallout. I'm good at that part. He left her there, surrounded by glass and steel and the architecture of power, and drove home to his small house where Emma was waiting with questions about his day and strong opinions about the injustice of delayed ice cream. That night, after Emma was asleep and the dishes were done, Daniel sat on his front porch watching Isabella's mansion across the street. Lights burned in multiple windows, her silhouette occasionally visible as she paced, talked on the phone, moved through her fortress dealing with crisis after crisis. Around 11, his phone rang. Isabella. Turn on the news, she said without preamble. He went inside, found the remote, pulled up the 24-hour business channel. Isabella's face filled the screen, a recording from earlier that evening. She stood at a podium, looking directly into the camera, and spoke with absolute clarity. Reed Industries is announcing a voluntary recall of all products utilizing architecture acquired from Meridian Technologies. We've discovered potential security vulnerabilities that, while not currently exploited, represent an unacceptable risk to our customers. This recall will cost our company significantly. Our stock price will likely fall. Some clients will lose faith in our judgment. But the alternative, continuing to distribute potentially compromised systems while we investigate, is unconscionable. Trust must be earned through action, not promises. This is us acting. The news anchor came back on, already speculating about the financial impact, the regulatory investigations that would follow, the questions about corporate oversight. You really did it, Daniel said into the phone. I really did it, and it's already a disaster. Stocks down 18% in after-hours trading. 3 major clients have already called threatening to cancel contracts. The board's getting calls from shareholders demanding my resignation. Are you okay? Honestly, I don't know. Ask me in a week when the real damage becomes clear. She paused. But I don't regret it. Whatever happens next, at least I know we did the right thing. They talked for a while longer, Isabella gradually winding down from crisis mode into something approaching human exhaustion. Eventually, she said goodnight, and they hung up, but Daniel stayed on the porch, watching her windows, making sure the lights stayed on. Because somewhere out there, whoever had orchestrated Meridian's collapse was watching too. And they'd just been told that Isabella Reed knew about their surveillance architecture, had cut off their access, and was digging deeper into what they'd been hiding. Richard's warning echoed in Daniel's mind. The people behind this don't like questions. Tomorrow would bring consequences. For Isabella, for Reed Industries, for everyone connected to what they'd just exposed. But tonight, Emma slept safely in her bed, trusting that her father would keep the world fair and fixable. And across the street, Isabella Reed stood alone in her fortress, having chosen principle over profit, truth over safety. Daniel had spent 6 years trying to be invisible. Now he was standing in the spotlight beside someone who'd just declared war on powerful enemies neither of them fully understood. There was no going back to small and safe, so he'd have to figure out how to make big and dangerous work instead. The fallout hit faster than anyone expected. By morning, Reed Industries stock had dropped 23%. By noon, the SEC had announced an investigation into corporate oversight failures. By evening, 3 board members had resigned and 7 major clients had suspended their contracts pending the security audit results. Daniel watched it unfold from his kitchen table, laptop open to financial news sites that kept refreshing with worse numbers. Emma sat across from him working on a science project about plant photosynthesis, occasionally looking up to ask questions he answered automatically while his mind tracked the damage. "Dad, you're not listening." "Sorry, baby. What was the question?" "I asked if plants feel sad when they don't get enough sunlight." Daniel closed his laptop, gave her his full attention. "I don't think plants feel emotions the way we do, but they definitely respond to their environment. Not enough light, they stop growing. They struggle." "Like people?" "Yeah, kind of like people." Emma considered this seriously, adding notes to her poster board in careful print. "Isabella's struggling, isn't she? Because of the work thing. How did you—" "Mrs. Chen showed me the news. She said Isabella did something brave but expensive." Emma looked up. "Is she going to be okay?" "I don't know yet." "Are you helping her?" "I'm trying." "Then she'll probably be okay. You're good at helping." Emma returned to her poster. The matter settled in her mind with 6-year-old certainty that people who tried hard and cared about each other would work things out. Daniel wished he had that kind of faith. His phone rang. Catherine. "We found the source of the payment to Richard," she said without preamble. "The shell company that paid him the $400,000. James traced it back through 3 layers of corporate shields. It leads to Vanguard Strategic Holdings." "Never heard of them." "Most people haven't. They're a private equity firm that specializes in acquiring distressed tech companies. Very quiet, very careful, very good at staying out of the news." Catherine paused. "Robert Lawson sits on their advisory board." Daniel felt something cold settle in his stomach. "The same Robert Lawson who apologized to me yesterday? Who voted for the recall?" "The same. And before you ask, yes, I've already told Isabella. She's not taking it well." "Where is she?" "Her office, alone. She kicked everyone out 20 minutes ago." Catherine's voice dropped. "Daniel, she trusts you. Maybe you should—" "I'm on my way." He called Mrs. Chen, who agreed to pick up Emma from school and keep her for dinner. Then he drove into the city, breaking speed limits he normally respected. Arriving at Reed Industries to find security had been doubled, and reporters camped outside the lobby trying to get statements from anyone who looked important. Daniel kept his head down, used the visitor badge that apparently still worked, and rode the elevator to the 28th floor. Isabella's assistant looked relieved when she saw him. "She won't answer her phone, won't let anyone in. Maybe you can—" "I'll try." He knocked on Isabella's office door. No response. Tried the handle, unlocked. Inside, Isabella sat at her desk, staring at her computer screen, her expression completely blank. "Isabella?" She didn't look up. "Did Catherine tell you about Robert?" "Yeah." "He apologized to you, shook your hand, voted for the recall, and the whole time he was part of the group that orchestrated Meridian's collapse in the first place." Her voice was flat, empty. "I'm so tired of being wrong about people." Daniel closed the door behind him, approached her desk carefully. "You weren't wrong. He did vote for the recall. He did apologize. Those things happened. Because he's covering his tracks, making himself look cooperative before the investigations start digging into his connections." Maybe, or maybe he actually regrets what happened and is trying to make it right now. People don't work like that. They don't suddenly develop consciences after years of corruption. Some people do. People change. People learn. People realize they were wrong and try to fix it. Isabella finally looked at him, and her eyes were red. She'd been crying, probably for the first time since this whole thing started. How do you still believe that? After what they did to you, how do you still think people are fundamentally good? I don't know if people are fundamentally good, but I know they're fundamentally complicated. Robert can be the person who failed to oversee Marcus Webb's report and the person who regrets it now. Richard can be the supervisor who destroyed my career and someone who's terrified of whoever's pulling his strings. Things can be more than one thing at once. That's not helpful. I need to know who to trust. Trust the evidence. Trust what people do, not just what they say. Daniel sat down across from her. Robert voted for the recall knowing it would hurt the company he has financial interest in. That's an action. It means something. Or it's a calculated move to appear innocent. Then let's find out which. Let's talk to him directly. Isabella shook her head. Catherine will kill me. Says we need to go through lawyers, keep everything formal. Don't give him a chance to coordinate his story. Impossible. Catherine's protecting you legally. I'm asking what you need emotionally. Do you need answers, or do you need to wait 6 months for lawyers to get them? She studied him for a long moment. You really think he'll tell us the truth? I think he'll tell us his version of it, which might not be the whole truth, but it's more than we have now. Isabella reached for her phone, dialed a number from memory. Robert? It's Isabella Reed. I need to meet with you. Tonight. Just you, me, and Daniel Hayes. She listened to his response, her expression unreadable. No lawyers, no recordings, just a conversation about Vanguard's strategic holdings and why they paid Richard Cole to destroy Meridian Tech. Whatever Robert said made her sit up straighter. She looked at Daniel, surprise flickering across her face. Fine. 8 p.m. Your office. She hung up. He said yes. Said he's been waiting for us to figure it out. Said it's time we knew the whole story. They met at Vanguard's headquarters, a nondescript building in the financial district that looked designed to be forgettable. Robert Lawson's office was on the top floor, wood-paneled and comfortable in an old-money way that suggested wealth so established it didn't need to show off. Robert sat behind his desk, looking older than he had in the boardroom, tired in a way that went deeper than missed sleep. He gestured for them to sit. Before you ask your questions, he said, let me tell you what actually happened. The full story, not the edited version Marcus Webb sold to the public. Daniel and Isabella exchanged glances but said nothing. 6 years ago, Meridian Tech developed something revolutionary. Not just smart home systems, but genuine predictive algorithms that could have changed how we think about security, privacy, personal data. The technology was valuable, but the company was a mess. Poor management, cash flow problems, founder disputes. They were going to fail within the year. Robert poured himself a glass of water from the pitcher on his desk, his hand steady. Vanguard saw an opportunity. We could acquire the company, the tech, all of it, for pennies on the dollar if we waited for them to collapse. But we needed them to collapse cleanly. No prolonged bankruptcy, no other buyers swooping in, no lawsuits that would tie up the assets. So we arranged for the collapse to happen on our timeline. You paid Richard to sabotage the system, Daniel said quietly. We paid Richard to accelerate the inevitable. The safety concerns you raised were real. The system was unstable. It was going to fail eventually. We just ensured it failed when and how we needed it to. Robert looked directly at Daniel. And we needed someone to blame publicly. Someone credible enough that the story would stick, but junior enough that they couldn't fight back effectively. You were convenient. The words landed like physical blows. Convenient. 6 years of his life destroyed because he was convenient. Why are you telling us this? Isabella asked, her voice tight. Because you're going to find out anyway. Your investigations, the SEC, James Park's forensic accounting, it all leads back to Vanguard eventually. And because I'm 71 years old and tired of carrying this around. Robert set down his water glass. When I voted for your recall yesterday, it wasn't strategy, it was guilt. You were doing the right thing for the right reasons, and I've spent 6 years profiting from doing the wrong thing for practical ones. What happened after Meridian collapsed? Daniel asked, needing to understand the full scope. Vanguard acquired the assets? We were going to. Had the whole acquisition structured, financing in place, timeline mapped out. And then Isabella beat us to it. Robert smiled without humor. You paid more than we wanted to spend. You moved faster than we anticipated. You bought Meridian before we could close our deal. Isabella leaned forward. So you put Richard inside my company to get back what you'd lost. We put Richard inside to monitor the technology we'd paid to acquire, to make sure you didn't discover what it could really do, to ensure that when the time came, we could either buy it from you or neutralize it if you became a threat. Neutralize how? However necessary. Discredit your company, tank your stock, force a buyout. We had contingencies. Robert looked at Isabella directly. The attack on your house was Richard going rogue. That wasn't authorized. We wanted you cautious and compliant, not cornered and investigating. Richard panicked when you started looking into the Meridian acquisition and did something stupid. And now? Daniel asked. What happens now that we know? Now, Vanguard has a choice. We can fight you, tie everything up in litigation, use our resources to bury your investigations, make this so expensive and prolonged that you give up. Or we can cooperate, turn over our records, testify to what actually happened, help you clean up the mess we created. In exchange for what? Isabella's voice was sharp with suspicion. Immunity from prosecution, for me, for the others involved in the original conspiracy. We tell you everything, you get your answers, and no one goes to prison. The silence that followed was heavy. Daniel could see Isabella calculating, weighing justice against practicality, truth against closure. I need to think about it, she said finally. Fair enough. You have 48 hours. After that, Vanguard's legal team takes over and this gets ugly. Robert stood, signaling the meeting was over. For what it's worth, Ms. Reed, you've built something good with Reed Industries. Something worth protecting. Don't let our mistakes destroy what you've created. Your mistakes already tried to, Isabella said coldly. I'm just deciding whether to let you help fix them or make you pay for them. They left Vanguard's building into a night that had turned cold, early spring giving way to one last blast of winter. Daniel and Isabella walked to where they'd parked, neither speaking until they reached Isabella's car. What are you going to do? Daniel asked. I don't know. Catherine will say take the deal, get the evidence, build the case properly. My board will say avoid the litigation, protect the company, move forward. She leaned against her car, looking exhausted. What would you do? I'd want to make them pay. Every single person who knew what happened and profited from it. I'd want them publicly exposed, prosecuted, punished. But that takes years, costs millions, consumes everything. And at the end, even if you win, what have you actually fixed? The damage is already done. The people hurt stay hurt. The systems that allowed it happen are still in place. Isabella looked at him. You sound like you've thought about this a lot. I spent 6 years angry, 6 years wanting revenge on everyone who'd destroyed my career. And you know what it got me? Nothing. Just more anger, more bitterness, more reasons to stay small and scared. He paused. Emma changed that. Having someone who needed me to be better than my worst impulses, who needed me to show her that the world could be fair even when it wasn't. So you're saying take the deal? Let them walk away? I'm saying decide what you actually want. Do you want punishment or do you want answers? Do you want revenge or do you want to build something better? Daniel looked at her directly. You can't have both. Not really. One path leads to years of fighting. The other leads to closure and moving forward. Isabella was quiet for a long time, staring at the dark sky above the city. I want to build something better. I'm just so angry that the people who caused this might not face consequences. They're facing consequences. Robert looked like a man carrying weight he can't put down. That's not nothing. It's not justice. No, but sometimes justice and closure aren't the same thing. She pushed off from her car, stood directly in front of him. What do you want, Daniel? What would give you closure after 6 years? He thought about it, really thought about what would actually heal the wound Meridian had left. I want my name cleared, publicly. I want the truth about what happened documented and acknowledged. I want the people who believed Marcus Webb's lies to know they were wrong. That's it? No lawsuit? No financial settlement? No demands that everyone involved be prosecuted? I have Emma. I have a life I built that matters. I don't need revenge. I just need the truth on record. Isabella studied his face like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. You're a better person than I am. I'm just a tired person who learned that being angry costs more than it's worth. She reached out, squeezed his hand briefly. Help me draft the deal with Robert. Make sure we get everything we need, full documentation, testimony, public acknowledgement of what happened. But we let Vanguard cooperate instead of fight. Catherine's going to hate it. Catherine's job is to protect the company legally. My job is to run it ethically. Sometimes those things conflict. Isabella got into her car, started the engine. Go home to Emma. I'll call you tomorrow when I've talked to the board. Daniel drove home thinking about justice and closure, about revenge and healing, about the difference between what we deserve and what actually helps us move forward. Emma was already asleep when he got there, Mrs. Chen having tucked her in and left a note about successful homework completion and moderate dessert consumption. He checked on his daughter, watched her sleep with that absolute peace only children achieved, then sat alone in his kitchen with the weight of what was coming. The next week moved fast. Isabella negotiated the terms with Vanguard, full cooperation in exchange for immunity from prosecution. Robert Lawson resigned from every board he sat on, including Reed Industries, but agreed to testify about the original conspiracy. Richard Cole, facing criminal charges for the house attack and evidence destruction, took a plea deal that required him to provide detailed testimony about everyone involved. Marcus Webb tried to fight it, hired expensive lawyers, and made threatening noises about defamation. But once the Vanguard documents became public, his position collapsed. He resigned from his firm quietly, disappeared into retirement. His reputation destroyed the way he'd destroyed Daniel's. The truth came out slowly, piece by piece. News articles documenting the conspiracy. Technical journals publishing Daniel's original safety warnings alongside acknowledgement that he'd been right. Industry forums discussing corporate oversight failures and the importance of protecting whistleblowers. Daniel's phone started ringing. Headhunters, former colleagues, companies wanting to hire the engineer who'd tried to save Meridian and been punished for it. He turned them all down, told them he was exactly where he needed to be. What he accepted was Isabella's offer to renovate the underfunded school where Emma studied. New computer lab, updated science equipment, a library that actually had books published in the current decade. It was practical, immediate, something that mattered to the life he'd built. Emma was delighted by the computers, less delighted that she couldn't monopolize them during lunch breaks. She invited Isabella to the ribbon-cutting ceremony the school held, insisted she sit in the front row with the other important people who made good things happen. Isabella came, sat next to Daniel while the principal gave a speech about community investment and educational opportunities. Emma waved at them from her seat with the other students, proud and unself-conscious in a way that made Daniel's chest tight. After the ceremony, Emma dragged Isabella to see the new library, explaining her complicated organizational system for which books were best and why the librarian should definitely listen to her recommendations. Isabella listened with genuine interest, asked questions that weren't condescending, treated Emma's opinions like they mattered. They ended up back at Daniel's house somehow, the three of them, Isabella having accepted Emma's invitation to see Dad's workshop with an enthusiasm that seemed only partly polite. The workshop was just Daniel's garage, filled with broken appliances he fixed for neighbors, tools organized on pegboards, works in progress in various states of completion. Isabella wandered through it like she was touring a museum, asking questions about techniques and tools, and how Daniel knew what needed fixing. You just learn to read what's wrong, he explained, demonstrating on a toaster that had stopped heating evenly. Things break in patterns. Once you know the patterns, you know where to look. Like code, Isabella said. Problems leave signatures. Exactly like code. Emma, who'd been poking around in the corner, emerged with a dusty box. Dad, what's this? Daniel recognized it immediately. The box he'd pulled from his closet weeks ago, the one with his old Meridian credentials and the termination letter he'd shown Richard. He'd meant to put it back, had forgotten about it in everything that followed. Just old work stuff, baby. Emma opened it anyway, pulled out his old employee badge. You look so young and serious. Were you serious all the time? I was serious about my work. She found one of the commendation letters. Couldn't read all the words, but got the gist. This says you were exceptional. That's like really, really good, right? It was a long time ago. But you're still exceptional now, just at different things. Emma put the letter back carefully. Like fixing toasters and making grilled cheese and helping Isabella with the important work thing. Isabella was smiling, soft and genuine. She's right, you know. Exceptional isn't about the size of what you're fixing. It's about whether you fix it right. They ordered pizza for dinner because none of them felt like cooking, and Emma lobbied hard for it being a special occasion. They ate on Daniel's back porch, watching the sun set behind the neighborhood, Emma maintaining a running commentary about everything happening in her 6-year-old universe. Isabella fit into it somehow. Didn't dominate the conversation or make it about herself. Just existed comfortably in the spaces Emma left, asking questions and listening to answers and being present in a way that suggested she was actually enjoying herself. After Emma went to bed, Isabella helped Daniel clean up the pizza boxes and paper plates, both of them moving in the easy rhythm they'd developed over the past weeks of working together. The board accepted my resignation today, Isabella said, drying a glass. Daniel nearly dropped the plate he was washing. What? Why? The stock's already recovering. The SEC investigation cleared you of wrongdoing. Clients are coming back. I didn't wait for them to accept it. I resigned before they could ask me to. She set down the glass carefully. I'm tired, Daniel. Tired of fighting. Tired of managing board politics and shareholder expectations and building security systems I don't fully understand. I built Reed Industries because my father left me no choice. I saved it because I couldn't stand to fail, but I never actually wanted any of it. So what are you going to do? I don't know yet. I have enough money to do nothing for the rest of my life, or to do something completely different, something smaller, something that matters in ways I can actually see. She looked at him. What would you do if you could start completely over? Daniel thought about it. I'd probably do exactly what I'm doing now. Fix things, raise Emma, try to leave the world a little better than I found it. That simple? That's simple. He dried his hands on a towel. Simple doesn't mean easy, but it means honest. Isabella nodded slowly, something settling in her expression. I think I need to figure out what honest looks like for me. What I actually want instead of what I'm supposed to want. That's fair. It might take a while. That's fair too. She gathered her things to leave, paused at the door. Thank you. For everything. For helping when you didn't have to. For showing me what it looks like to actually have priorities that make sense. You helped me too. Reminded me I was still good at things I'd convinced myself I needed to forget. They stood in his doorway, the space between them charged with possibility and uncertainty, and the awareness that whatever happened next would be different from what came before. I'll see you around? Isabella asked. I live across the street. Pretty sure we'll see each other. I meant... She stopped, smiled slightly. Yeah, I'll see you around. 3 weeks passed. Daniel watched Isabella's mansion through his window, saw lights on at odd hours, saw her come and go at irregular intervals. She didn't knock on his door, didn't call or text or ask for help with anything. He told himself that was fine. She'd said she needed time to figure things out. He respected that. Had his own life to focus on anyway. Emma's soccer season starting, a washing machine for the Johnsons that needed a new motor, the quiet routines that had defined his existence before Isabella knocked on his door that rainy night. But he missed her. Missed the conversations that challenged him. Missed having someone who saw him as more than just Emma's dad or the neighborhood fix-it guy. Missed the feeling that he was part of something bigger than his small, careful life. Emma noticed, of course. You keep looking at Isabella's house, just making sure the security system's working. Dad, I'm 6, not stupid. You miss her. How do you know that? Because you get this sad look when you think about her, like when you look at the pictures of Mom but don't want to talk about it. Daniel sat down next to Emma on the couch, pulled her close. You're too smart for your own good. I know, Mrs. Chen says it's genetic. Emma leaned into him. You should go talk to her. Isabella, not Mom. Mom's gone and doesn't want to be found. But Isabella's right across the street, and maybe she just doesn't know you miss her. It's more complicated than that, baby. Everything's more complicated than that. But sometimes complicated things still need someone to be brave first. The doorbell rang before Daniel could respond. Emma jumped up, ran to answer it, and there stood Isabella holding a pot and looking nervous. "Hi," Isabella said. "I made soup. Well, I had it delivered from a restaurant and then put it in a pot from my kitchen. So technically I assembled soup, which isn't the same as making it, but Emma said I should try, so I'm trying." Emma beamed. "What kind of soup?" "Chicken noodle. I Googled what kids like." "I like chicken noodle. Dad, Isabella brought soup." Daniel appeared behind Emma, taking in the sight of Isabella Reed, former Billionaire CEO, standing on his porch holding assembled soup and looking more uncertain than he'd ever seen her. "Hi," he said. "Hi. I know I said I needed time to figure things out, and I did, and I figured out that I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm probably going to be bad at it, but I'd like to try anyway if that's okay." "Try what?" "This, whatever this is. Being neighbors who are also friends, who are also maybe something more than friends, if that's something you're interested in exploring." She held up the soup. "I'm not good at simple. I'm not good at small. I don't know how to do normal things like make soup from scratch or ride a bike or exist without 17 backup plans. But I'm trying to learn, and I thought maybe you could help." Emma was practically vibrating with excitement. "Say yes, Dad. Say yes to the soup and the learning and the whatever this is." Daniel looked at his daughter, then at Isabella, then at the soup that represented effort and vulnerability and the willingness to try even when you didn't know if you'd succeed. "Does it need fixing?" he asked. Isabella laughed, surprised and genuine. "Probably. Most things do." "Then come in," Daniel said, stepping aside and opening the door wider. "We'll figure it out together." Inside his small kitchen, the three of them assembled bowls and spoons and napkins. Isabella's soup was actually good, the kind of professional quality that came from expensive restaurants, but somehow tasted better eaten from mismatched bowls in a cramped kitchen with a 6-year-old offering commentary on proper soup-eating technique. They talked about small things, Emma's upcoming field trip, a bird's nest Mrs. Chen had discovered in her garage, the movie playing at the discount theater that Emma was campaigning to see. Normal things. Simple things. The kind of conversation that built foundation instead of drama. After dinner, Emma insisted they all read together, which turned into Emma reading to both of them from her library book, while they sat on the couch on either side of her. Isabella listened with the same focused attention she'd probably once given quarterly earnings reports, asked questions about plot points, admitted she'd never read this series as a kid. "You should start from the beginning," Emma said seriously. "Book 1's the best. I'll loan it to you." "I'd like that." When Emma finally went to bed, Daniel and Isabella found themselves alone on his front porch again, the same spot where this had all started weeks ago. "I meant what I said," Isabella said quietly. "I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have a plan. I just know that the life I had before felt empty, and the life I want looks something like this." She gestured at his house, his street, the ordinary neighborhood that had become extraordinary through proximity. "I don't know if that makes sense. It makes perfect sense. I'm probably going to be terrible at it, at being normal, at fitting in, at not trying to control everything." "Probably," Daniel agreed. "But you'll learn, same way I learned to make grilled cheese and Emma learned to fold dumplings. You just keep trying until it works. And if it doesn't work, then you try something else. That's what fixing things means, testing, adjusting, trying again until you find what fits." Isabella moved closer, tentative, testing boundaries. "I like you, a lot. And I like Emma even more. And I like how you make me want to be someone different than who I've been, someone better. You're already better than you think." "Really not. I'm controlling and paranoid and bad at trust and worse at vulnerability. You're also brave and honest and willing to lose billions of dollars to do the right thing. You're complicated. That's not the same as bad." She kissed him then, soft and uncertain, and nothing like the confident CEO who'd stood on his porch demanding help that rainy night. This was someone learning to ask instead of demand, to hope instead of expect, to risk instead of control. Daniel kissed her back, equally uncertain, equally hopeful. They broke apart after a moment, both slightly embarrassed, both smiling. "That was nice," Isabella said. "Yeah, it was. Can we do it again sometime? I think we can arrange that." They sat together on his porch steps, shoulders touching, watching the neighborhood settle into sleep. Across the street, Isabella's mansion stood dark and empty, a monument to a life she was learning to leave behind. "I'm selling it," she said, following his gaze. "The house. Don't need something that big. Thought maybe I'd find something smaller. Maybe on this street, maybe close enough to walk to someone's porch when I need company. Does someone have a name?" "He does. And a daughter who's making me read an entire fantasy series, and a garage full of broken toasters that need fixing." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Think he'd mind having a neighbor who's still figuring out how to be a person instead of a corporation?" "Amish boy bastard but just saints." "I think he'd be okay with that." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from having said what needed saying and trusting what comes next would work itself out. Emma's bedroom light was off. Mrs. Chen's radio had gone quiet. The street had emptied of cars and people. Just a normal evening in a normal neighborhood where a single dad and a former billionaire sat on porch steps learning to trust that simple could be enough. That fixing broken things sometimes meant fixing broken people. That starting over didn't require erasing what came before, just choosing what to carry forward. Daniel had spent 6 years building a life where he was safe and small and invisible. Had convinced himself that was all he deserved after Meridian. Had taught himself to want less, expect less, risk less. But Emma had taught him differently. Had shown him that being needed meant being visible. That love required risk. That the best things in life came from trying even when you didn't know if you'd succeed. And Isabella had reminded him who he'd been before fear made him small. Had seen the engineer underneath the furnace repair guy, the father underneath the scapegoat, the man underneath the armor of careful invisibility. Together, maybe they could build something neither had managed alone. Not perfect, not smooth, but honest and real and worth the uncertainty. Emma had asked if helping Isabella would make things better. Not just different, better. Daniel looked at the woman beside him, her head on his shoulder, her breath evening out into something approaching peace. Looked at his small house where his daughter slept safely, trusting tomorrow would be fair because her father had taught her the world could be. Yeah, he thought. This was better. Not perfect, not fixed, not finished, but better. And sometimes better was enough. Inside, the house was warm, the dishes were clean. Emma's library books sat stacked on the coffee table waiting to be read. The broken toaster in the garage would still be there tomorrow, along with the washing machine and the leaking faucet and all the other small problems that needed fixing. But tonight, Daniel sat on his porch with someone who saw him completely and chose to stay anyway. Someone who was learning that wealth couldn't buy connection, that control couldn't replace trust, that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was admit you didn't have all the answers. "What are you thinking about?" Isabella asked quietly. "That 6 years ago I thought my life was over, thought I'd lost everything that mattered, and maybe I did lose everything I thought mattered, but I found things that actually matter. Emma, this house, this street, the kind of simple that isn't small, it's just honest. And now? Now I'm thinking that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you clears space for the best thing to find you. It just takes a while to see it." Isabella lifted her head, looked at him directly. "You think I'm the best thing?" "I think you're something good, and I've gotten pretty good at recognizing good things when they show up." She kissed him again, less uncertain this time, more sure, and Daniel kissed her back. 6 years of careful distance, finally giving way to the possibility that some risks were worth taking. The rain that had brought them together had long since stopped. The systems that had failed were being rebuilt. The truth that had been buried was finally acknowledged. The people who'd profited from lies were facing consequences, if not justice. And in a small house on a quiet street, a single dad who'd learned to fix broken things discovered that sometimes the most broken things to fix were the walls we built around ourselves. Not with grand gestures or perfect solutions, but with small acts of trust. With choosing honesty over safety. With letting people in even when it scared you. with opening the door when someone knocked, even if you didn't know what would walk through. The night deepened, the street grew quieter, and Daniel Hayes, exceptional engineer turned furnace repairman, turned something he was still figuring out, sat on his porch with a woman who was learning to be human and felt, for the first time in 6 years, like the world might actually be fair after all. Not because it always was, but because enough people chose to make it that way when it mattered. And that, he thought, was a lesson worth teaching Emma. Worth believing himself. Worth building a life around one fixed toaster, one honest conversation, one quiet evening at a time.